Howdy, hey everybody. Note to self, never say howdy, hey again. Sound like a talking turd. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope you can hear me okay. Everything looks all right, sounds all right. Hope everyone's doing okay out there. I'll make sure I've got one button set the way I need it set so I don't mess things up. Yeah, it's good. All right, good. We get some coffee, then we'll get right to it. Priorities, right? Yeah, Meryl, your basement's going to be coming up very, very soon. Very soon. I've got everything ready to go. Just need to have fewer brush fires in my other life to put out all the time, seems like. Let's see here. Hey, Christina Carducci. 70s, MXR envelope. Okay, when switched on, sound just gets softer, but no wah sound. 9-volt battery only, the foam dissolved and left dust all over. Did clean it. What are steps to find the problem? First of all, no, YouTube. Now would not be a good time to insert ads. Good Lord. We just got started, YouTube. Come on, man. Dude, you know, it's important to make a buck, but there's a time and a place. Anyway, to your question. Hey, Christina. First of all, you want to make sure that you don't have any dust or any battery leakage on the board, because if the old battery leaked, you can have electrolytic material all over the board, which can cause shorts. Most likely thing is that there are some electrolytics in your old pedal that need to be changed out because they are dried out and desiccated, because they're as old as I am, and I feel pretty dried out and desiccated from time to time. It's a pretty simple thing to do, and I guess given the market today, a 70s MXR envelope filter might be worth the hour or two of labor to do it. It's like $10 worth of parts at most, you know, cleaning the board, changing out the electrolytics, making sure all the contacts are good, all the solder joints are good, that all the jacks are tight to the chassis, and then see what you find. But unless you do all that, you're just throwing darts randomly and hoping to land on the problem. Hey, Nick. Nick Orr says, early question here. The reverb on my kit-built Deluxe reverb sounds way darker and more disconnected than on my ratio. I tried swapping the tanks and both reverbs sound the same. So I'm pretty sure it's something in the circuit. I've also tried swapping V3 and V4 with no change. Any ideas of what could be causing this? Thanks. Well, it's a kit build, so I don't know, and I say this in all intended kindness, whether you built it correctly. It's a pretty simple circuit, but everything in the circuit has to be correct for it to work right. One of the questions I would have myself is the sound difference in the return or the send? So I would advise this as a troubleshooting step only. So pull the power the amp off, pull the phase inverter and or output tubes. Step 1. Get a make or buy an RCA to 1/4-inch adapter. Plug your speaker into the 1/4-inch adapter going into the RCA of the reverb send, the one that goes out from the amp to the reverb tank, because the little reverb driver transformer is essentially a very small output transformer that expects an 8 ohm load. So you're in luck. You've got one in the amp already. And do that to both amps and see if the sound is the same, running the RCA out of each amp's reverb send to the same speaker. If the sound is the same there, then the problem's going to be in the return circuit. If the problem's different there, then you've narrowed it down to something in the V3 wiring. But I cannot tell you more than that from here at a distance. But that's one way that you can troubleshoot for the cost of $2 $4 jacks and a little bit of soldering. If I'm sure maybe Sweetwater's got a 1/4-inch to RCA connector or something, but I don't know, adapter. I just roll my own when I need such things. Hey, Warlock, long time listener, first time chatter. Well, welcome. I'm glad you made it. Hey, Bill Avonda, I have not heard of Mark's Guitar Loft, but I'll look for them. Hand-wired amps out of New Hampshire. I hope they're fantastic. Well, the new AC15 hand-wired, try this again. Hey, Drew Solers. Well, the new AC15 hand-wireds are even heavier than the C1s at just over 50 pounds, and they have reverb, so fidelity to the original circuit is suspect at best, caveat emptor. With any of the companies, especially the big three, Marshall, Vox, and Fender, PV used to be on the list. They've fallen off. You should always be wary of marketing claims. Sometimes Vox makes a really good amp that they fail to promote properly, like the Custom Series, and then they put out something, the flagship, the hand-wireds of various eras, which always have more problems than the standard version. Like the Custom Series, aside from the weight, it's a really good amp at a very reasonable price. Fender's reissue series, the 65s, are pretty damn good. They ship with terrible speakers. And the high-end versions of those amps that Fender offer are total rip-offs. So, and I don't know that Marshall offers anything worth paying for these days. It's frustrating, isn't it? Any plans on having some more technical difficulties? It'd be fun to see the Amp Tech Mafia have a meeting and determine who gets to sleep with the fishes. Well, I want to do it. I missed a question from Alex G. I'll get there, Alex. Sorry, I just saw that. I have not had the time. I had a whole bunch of people lined up to do it last year, and then my time got away from me. But I've got some people I'd really like to get on who have decades of experience in the industry. I had some technical things on my end because I thought some of the ones I did were not great. I would really love to redo the one where I had Dave Friedman on because there was such a lag between when he would speak and when I would hear it that sometimes I inadvertently interrupted him. And I'd like to do that again sometime because I felt that was just a train wreck. Ken Fisher would be the train wreck. Friedman's the Friedman. Anyway, but don't bump. But I thought the one with Ted Woodford went really well. All the technical issues were on his end. His internet was almost out that day. But I want to bring it back. But I also don't want to get so caught up in having a YouTube channel and having YouTube people and stuff on that it becomes, I don't want to be a function of entertainment primarily. I still want to be primarily about the amplifiers and about music and guitars and all the stuff that's objectively interesting without making it about me. And there's a danger in that as the channel grows. And, there's a danger both in terms of the more people discover the channel, and I'm grateful that people are, every week there's a new fresh batch of people who discover it and tell me I'm an idiot. That's fine. That's just, you stick your head out of the ground, you're going to get whacked by the mole police. But the people who praise me or when I get positive feedback, I have to keep grounded because I can't be like, I'm such a muckety-muck on YouTube. I'm the YouTube guy. No one knows me at the grocery store. No one knows me anywhere I go. This is a little bitty niche, and I have to keep everything perspective. So I was getting behind in some work, and I was spending a lot of time getting interviews lined up, and I thought this is the wrong focus right now. So I want to bring it back, but I want to bring it back faster, better. We can achieve this. Stronger, faster, better. Alex G, almost missed your question. Is a good single channel amp always going to sound better than a good multi-channel amp, in my opinion? It depends on what you mean by a multi-channel amp. I don't know that there are have been very many really great sounding 3-channel amps. I think the Shure PT100 and the previous Custom Audio Electronics one that John did are really close to that. But even John would tell you he had to make compromises. This channel was the optimal thing, and the other thing was a feature. Now, when you get into strict 2 channels, if they're not looking at foot switchable channels or MIDI control channels, then yeah, you can make a two-channel amp sound every bit as good as a one-channel amp, as long as the two channels aren't too far from each other in purpose. For instance, Dumble, and that is foot switchable, but that's that's one of the reasons they cost a lot, and not just the ones that Howard Alexander made, but the ODS variants out there. You will have a clean, which is comparable to the clean of almost any 60s Fender, and you will have an overdrive, which is comparable to a cranked, fire-breathing 60s Fender. It doesn't really sound like a Marshall; it's its own thing. Those are great, but you pay for the privilege. And then the trouble is, most multiple channel amps that have been made have been to satisfy the marketing department. Hey, it does this, it does this. It's a floor wax and a dessert topping, and it tastes like a floor wax when you play it. So there are other considerations, like if you really want to sound great, you want to minimize the use of master volumes. And I sell master volumes. I install master volumes. I'm a big believer in master volumes. But if you can get away without them, like if you had a 40-watt Fender for your clean amp, say a Pro or Super Reverb, and then you had a 30-watt or 20-watt Marshall style amp for your dirt, then you can have both amps on a fairly large stage without a master volume, and you could scale that down and say I've got a Deluxe Reverb for my clean, and I've got this little 15-watt Marshall for the dirt, and you don't have to hit them. You'll still probably use the master volume on the Marshall, but it'd be like going from 5 o'clock to 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock, not 5 o'clock to 9 o'clock to make it usable. So sometimes the right tool for the job is better than the tool that kind of sort of does everything. Where were we? Hey, Warlock, do I have a preference on amp kits? I would avoid the mod kits. I would go towards Mojotone always. Mojotone or the ones that they sell through Stu Mac, it's the same kits. Because I know you're going to be getting good transformers. And I need to look into the mod kits that they're doing at CE Distribution, see what transformers they're using for those. I've not researched that. But in terms of knowing what the transformers are, knowing what the chassis quality is, knowing what the cabinet quality is, Mojotone is just leaps and bounds ahead of the competition. And the Stu Mac kit is the Mojotone kit, just rebranded because they've got a partnership. And I don't want to speculate too much about that, but I know that that's what's going on. I want to have Merlin on. I'd like to meet Merlin, but I have the sense that he's not on the internet. I have a lot of friends and friendly acquaintances in this industry who seem to know everyone. And I think he's just in Merlin's cave. Professor Dan, the answer is same question, same answer. Mojotone. Hey, Christina, good question. Dim bulb tester, I got one back there. Why does the bulb only light up if there's a short in the amp? The electricity is going through the bulb whether the amp is working correctly or not. Mental block. Let's see the best way to explain this without doing a glass of water with 2 electrodes in it, then adding salt to the water, which is how a lot of us were taught this kind of thing. The light bulb will only glow when there's sufficient current. There will only be sufficient current if there is low resistance between the hot and the neutral in an AC circuit like we're describing here. So when you have very little current, because an amplifier which is operating correctly is not drawing a lot of current, it's acting kind of as a resistor. So let's say that this is an overview from the cloud's view. Don't get hung up on technical differences here. Let's say that an amplifier which operates normally is acting like a 1 meg resistor. And this is just broad strokes. So you have AC here, you have AC here, you have some amount of resistance to current here, and that's that amp. And it's when the amp is off, there's no resistor. It's infinite resistance. You turn the amp on, there's a 1 meg resistor. But the amp has a short in it. All of a sudden, instead of a 1 meg resistor, it's no resistance. It's a straight path. That's all the current possible that can go through that light bulb. So the light bulb will only glow as there is current. Let's see. I can show you. Let's see. Don't try this at home, kids. Let's see. All right. I'm going to take you off the screen so you guys can see this better. All right, so there's that light bulb, and I've got this wired into this. I've got the socket custom wired the socket, so the incoming hot goes through the bulb, then to the next socket, and the neutral bypasses that. So I can turn the whole thing off here if I have a problem. And don't do this at home, because I'm just going to stick these pliers with insulated handles into the IEC connector here. So watch the bulb. I'm barely in it now, just barely touching it. It's dim. Now I've got a good strong connection, it goes brighter. Now, if I were to replace these pliers with a resistor, and I could put a 1 meg resistor through here and have the bulb come on a little bit. I could put it with a 500K resistor, half the value, in here instead, and have the light come on a little more, or I could put a 10K and have it come on a lot, and then I could just have straight wire like you're getting with this and have the full glow of the bulb. I'm not doing that for the case of this demonstration because I don't want to be dealing with live AC and trying to focus on what the camera sees and all that. This was safe. Very crude explanation. Hope it made sense. So, the utility of that to us as techs is that if there's a dead short in the amp, that light bulb's gonna glow, and that light bulb's gonna steal all the available true power. True current is gonna be transformed from electrical current to light, to that heat of the light bulb, which means that if there's something wrong in the amp, it's not gonna burn something in the amp. It's not gonna even blow a fuse. It's gonna trip the light bulb before it can even blow the fuse. So that's a good way just to have a very safe method. But the trouble is, that's an incandescent bulb. They're being phased out. I'm gonna have to buy like 30 of them and keep them in a safe safe cache somewhere, because I know in 5 years they'll be unavoidably unavailable. Let me turn the fan up. It is very warm in Memphis. Let me turn that on, and I'm putting on a little gate so you don't hear the fan. It's not a gate, it's a ducker. But if I go back to playing any guitar, I'll turn that off, but I've got to have that fan on. So hopefully that answered the question, but that's a 150 watt bulb, Merrill, and I've got a 300 watt if I have an SVT or something like that. Let's see. Hey, Lovecrafty from the UK. Care to share my most complicated horror story repair, the one that had me pull my hair about all others? I've got one right now. I don't know that it's the most, but it's up there. It is a 68 custom Deluxe Reverb. And I have done everything I can think of short of one thing, which I'm going to try this afternoon, and it has a buzz in the reverb recovery stage. There's no noise in the send, and there is absolutely no noise in the dry path at all. The noise is only present in the wet part of the return, and it is present even if the V4A grid is grounded out, and it is present even if the input lug of the reverb pot is grounded out. It only goes away if the wiper is grounded out, but it doesn't go away if the wiper of the pot is grounded to the ground connection of the wiper of the pot. It only goes away if the wiper of the pot is connected to the cathode bypass cap negative of that stage, but it does not go away if I connect the wiper of the reverb pot to the cathode the negative of the cathode bypass gap of any other stage, even though they're all tied together. And I have replaced just about everything trying to troubleshoot this. I think the solution, I think the problem is we've got a faulty reverb driver transformer, and it is putting noise on the B plus and that reverb stage is a place in the amp that's under filtered. I don't know this for sure. I've got to open the whole amp back up and disconnect the reverb transformer red and blue wires and cross my fingers that that's it. Otherwise, I've got to get into chicken sacrificing time. But I've had this amp here for over 3 weeks working on this, maybe a month. And it's, not just a month constant staring at it, thinking about it, trying this. That wasn't doing it, trying that. But I've never had an amp where muting a pot wiper only works if it's to one ground in the amp, even when the other grounds are connected to it and they're adjacent to it within like 3 inches. It's very bizarre. If anyone out there watching this has got a brilliant idea, please let me know, because I'm this close to sacrificing chickens. And I've worked on, I don't know how many hundreds, approaching 1,000 Deluxe reverbs. I've never run into this issue before, or any Fender circuit with reverb. Hey, Patrick Pierce from Raleigh. Trying to find a smaller profile reverb trim switch for my AC15C1. The Vox and the generic replacements are all huge. Any suggestions? Yeah, it's just a dual gang switch. Let me send you a link to one. Let's see. That uses a, I'm trying to remember, that uses a quarter inch stereo for the switch. Just 1 second, let me find you something. Doop-a-doo, foot switches, foot switch boxes. Just a second. I know it's exciting watching me scroll, or not watching me scroll. Huh. I thought they had one that was, yeah. I thought they had one that was TRRS. Quarter inch stereo, all right. Well, I thought this place I'm looking at had a Fender style dual foot switch, the one about this big, that went out to a quarter inch TRS, but they don't seem to have it there. And the Fender one is absolutely crap quality. So let me send you to a different one. Let me send you to a different option, which is from Boss. No, I don't want to complete a $10,000 DJ rig. Thank you very much. This is one that I've always liked using. They're very small. They do what you need them to do. Where's the double one? Well, shit, that Boss has made that thing huge. Let's see, this one might do the trick. They've got a new one on the market. They've overcomplicated things. Shit. Boss used to have one about this big. Well, I am just wasting everyone's time. I'll look afterwards and pop it in the description after the video's done, and I'll try to remember to do that, Patrick. They are out there, but my usual sources were running dry. Sorry. It's real simple to build one, but the flip side is most people want it to be a little bit larger. I have to have it a little bit larger. So I've got size 14 shoes. So, I mean, if it's too small, I'm going to hit them both at the same time. Let's see. Hey, Wrecking Crew, I am always slammed. The best way to reach me is send me an email, and I will look for that. It sounds terrible. I get hundreds of emails a day. Not all of them for people wanting amp work. It's, will you sell this Chinese piece of crap on your channel? Will you do this? Hey, you may need to, you qualify for a new extended warranty on your car, all this bullshit. So it's just really hard to keep up with everything. Is there a rule for choosing the speaker impedance in tube amps, or is it simply a designer's preference, Federico says? Well, it's not really a rule in terms of one impedance sounding better than another, because properly designed amp, a 4 ohm speaker with a correct tap on a high quality transformer is going to sound the same as an 8 ohm speaker. What you have to do is say, well, what are the most common speakers out there? What of the speaker cabs out there? What are the most common loads? So you're not going to find a lot of speaker cabs with a 2 ohm load. You're not going to find a lot of speaker cabs even with a 4 ohm load when you're talking about guitar amps. Most of them are going to be 8 or 16. And so you say, well, I want this amp to sound good at 4, 8, or 16. But if I'm selling this as a combo and we've got an 8 ohm speaker, then I need to make if I go with an 8 ohm speaker, then someone else has an 8 ohm cab, they'll use the 4 ohm tap. That's great. If I put an 8 ohm speaker and they all have a 16 ohm speaker, well, that would work. But if I get a 16 ohm speaker, so one of the reasons that Fender did 8 ohm speakers for the most part, and the 1x12s, is because if you paired it with another extension cab, 8 ohm 1x12, 8 ohm 1x12, amp worked fine at 4 ohms. Vox tends to do 16 because you 16 and then you external cab 16, then you have 8. So all you've got to do is make sure that whatever speakers that you sell to go with the amp will easily pair. So you can use 8 or 16, that's very easy. Either can work with an external cab with some other speakers. But if you choose a 2 ohm speaker, they can't run that speaker with anything else because no transformer wants to have a 1 ohm load. Does that make sense? So you go high. That's why you see 8 and 16 typically for combos. As far as the amp is designed, you want to run with common impedances, and so you'll have 2, 4, 8 or 4, 8, 16, or sometimes just 4 and 8 or just 8 and 16. Hey, Christina, can I tell us what parts pins 1 through 9 do on a tube? Is always the same for different tubes? It is not always the same. There are a lot of variants out there. The most common ones you're going to run into on a 9-pin tube, which are called Novel tubes, Novel because they're 9 pins, are either the 12AX, 12AT, 12AY, 12AU, 5751 variants, which have 1 and 6 being the plates or anodes, 2 and 7 being the grids, and 3 and 8 being the cathodes, 4 and 5 and 9 being the heaters. So that's the most common, but there are other Novel preamp tube sockets that don't use that wiring. And then you have the EL84 wiring, where 2 is the grid, 3 is the cathode, 4 and 5 are the heater, 7 is the screen. Is that right? No, 7 is the plate, and 9 is the screen. So that's a very different, it's the same socket, same pins as a 12AX7, it's not the same pin out. For any tube that you have, you can look up the tube's data sheet, and you will find what the wiring for that is. So if you get some old Gibson in, hey, that looks like a 12AX7. It's not necessarily. Look and see what the tube actually is and how it's wired. Same for output tubes, for Novel output tubes. But most of the time you're going to run into most of the time you're going to run into 12A star variants or EL84s. Any actual sound advantage between a single-ended 15-watt over a push-pull? I recently watched Uncle Doug's 25-watt behemoth. People like to accomplish things which are difficult. It's difficult to build a 25-watt single-ended amp that doesn't hum, because single-ended amps don't reject hum inherently in the output section, and they draw a lot more current, and they need a great big transformer. And for multitude of reasons, most single-ended amps have always tended to be very small, like a Champ, 5 watts, 1.6V6, very small iron, because you could make an amp that worked with very cheap iron and only a single output tube. So you could have a good quality student model. That's what it was for. If you want more volume, if you want more output level, You can either make a very expensive, very heavy single-ended amp that's prone to humming, or you can be smart and use a push-pull design and have a lot more output power, or a lot nicer, cleaner sound with less hum for a lot less money, because you don't have to use iron as big. So that's where the industry went. And people were always like, but what if? And so it's like, what if I strapped a V12 to my Honda Civic? Can you do it? I'm sure someone else out there's done it. Is it necessary? No. Is it a good idea? Well, in the case of the V12 and a Honda Civic, no. In the case of Uncle Doug's 25-watt single-ended, it probably is. In the case of other very big, heavy single-ended amps like the Jikas, terrible ideas, terrible execution of an idea that's not necessary. You know, if you can really play, you don't need some strange, esoteric, expensive amp to be able to make music. You want a strange, esoteric thing for the sake of saying, I've got a strange, esoteric thing. And I think it's a separate mentality, and it's fine. It's fine if you want to do that, but I don't think it's necessary. Should be able to do a good interview with Zach now. Yeah, well, we've talked about it. In fact, we might. Next time he comes to Memphis or I go to Nashville, we might do one actually in the same room. But yeah, I was very glad to help him get his audio sorted out, because his live streams for the last 6 months or so, when he got the new phone, the sound quality just was not really there. You just couldn't really hear what he's saying. You know, and everything he has to say is interesting. And I like Zach as a person. I love his channel. I love the content. But now we can hear it. So glad to have played some small part in that. I need to get one of his t-shirts and his mugs. That wasn't, if you watch his Zach, I wasn't asking for one. I'll buy one. I just need to get around to it. I bought the Keith Williams mug, but Nikki stole it. I have the 5-watt World mug, but Nikki stole it because it fits her hand really well. It's a small mug. So I've got these giant generic ones. Unless Crate and Barrel, or is this Party Bun? No, Crate and Barrel. If Crate and Barrel wants to endorse me, you know, I'll be glad to. Because I've got a semi-broken handle on one. I need a new set. Because when I find a really good coffee mug, that's my mug. I've got 3.5. I scrolled too fast. Where was I? Hey, PF. If using a Variac set to 117, line voltage 120, amp bias at 117, how low can wall voltage go before it makes dangerous operating conditions with the amp? Thanks for all the wisdom. You don't want the heaters to go below 5.5 typically, unless you just love the sound and can afford to replace tubes more often. It won't hurt. The tubes won't be happy operating for a long time at lower than 5.5 volts on the heaters. Everything else is totally safe. You know, it'll either make sound or it won't, or it'll make sound but it's lower, really low in volume. You just don't want to stress out the output tubes by giving them too little heater voltage for too long. But, you know, everyone's like, but Eddie did this. I'm like, I don't think any of us have a concept of how much Eddie Van Halen had on hand in terms of money at the peak of his career, or was able to get money, versus the low cost of Sylvania 6CA7s, which he was going through like candy, in addition to other candies. So it's a very hard game for the rest of us to play these days. DCM 9300, hello. I believe I've commented on a preference. He believes I've commented on a preference for either carbon film or carbon comp resistors over metal film. Is it completely empirical, or is there a scientific basis to explain my preference? It's real simple. If it's an old 50s or 60s Fender that had carbon composites, and it's not in the power supply, and it's not a screen grid resistor, and it's not in the bias supply, I'll use the carbon composites in the preamp, because that's what it had, and that circuit sounds fine with the carbon composite, and it's keeping it as close to the original as possible. Now in that power section, I'll use metal oxides, I'll use metal films. Same for the bias. The screen grid resistors, I like to use sometimes metal oxide, sometimes metal film. Typically I'll use wire wounds, little 3-watt wire wounds, because there are places where carbon comp offers no tonal difference or tonal advantage and has all the practicality of a wet paper bag. So, you know, I'm not a snob and I'm not chasing some kind of mojo, but cumulatively there's a difference. And so if it's a 60s Fender that's in really good shape, I try to use the carbon composites. If it's a 70s one that's not worth as much, and I'll put in a carbon film happily. It's not going to make or break it. If I have a really high gain amp, I'll put in some metal films. I really like metal films, but it depends on the circuit, the level of gain, and what the function of each resistor in a circuit does. And where, in certain parts of certain circuits, carbon, whether film or composite, offers any harmonic distortion differences which are perceived as advantageous over a metal film, which will not necessarily introduce those things. R.G. Keene has a really good paper out there of doing such tests of how carbon composite, when sufficient voltage is present, demonstrably introduce artifacts which people find pleasing. Carbon film does this to a lesser degree, metal film not at all. And so it's not like this is best or this is worse. It's on a case-by-case basis. I have certain preferences to achieve certain results. If we're talking about a 1.5K cathode resistor, it does not matter. If we're talking about a 100K or 56K slope resistor, it can matter. When we talk about a preamp plate resistor early in the circuit, it matters a lot. Later in the circuit, not so much. But it is a scientific basis, but the scientific basis is also mixed in with, well, either one is technically acceptable, and I like the way this one sounds. But you won't always hear that difference. You won't hear the same difference changing X part in a Fender circuit versus a Marshall circuit, because the voltages and the gain levels and their how the circuit works together are different. Hey, Eric Blaha. Finally bought a 73 Deluxe Reverb per my recommendation. Great. I hope you love it. Yeah. I try to reply to every comment on these streams, at least the ones that are addressed to me as opposed to talking to each other. Towards the third hour, I invariably miss some. Sometimes I get through all of them, but I try. Thank you for being here, Eric. T777's got a 65 Rishi Princeton with a Jensen P12K. It was P12Q. Sorry if I could read. Kind of bright, but I like it with volume at 3, treble just below 4, bass just above 3. Thoughts on how the P12Q compares to WGS and Celestion speakers? Thanks. Well, the P12Q is brighter, and I believe it's a little less efficient. And you're going to have a weaker low end. Not in terms of not having low end, but in terms of the low end having some snap. It's going to be a softer sound. I probably would choose one of the WGS or Celestion speakers. I like the Celestion Gold 10 is fantastic in a Princeton. And you guys have heard me liking many different 10-inch WGSs in Princetons. The P12Q, that would be if the client was really going after something a little soft. I like the Alessandros as well, DB, but they're not always available. And they have a mid-range thing that it's not right for every player. But if I had like some hot shit telly guy who wanted to use a Princeton for flamboyant telly riffs, the Alessandro would be a great choice for that. I think I love the way the mids jump out on that. That's one of the things that's hard to remember is that when I recommend things, I'm not always recommending the thing that I personally prefer. I'm always trying to match people's playing styles and tastes to the speaker's strengths and avoid the speaker's weaknesses, because, you know, player A does not sound like player B, both of whom play better than I do. But I know what makes player A sound good and what works for player A, and same for player B. So I may recommend two radically different speakers, both of which are great, but they would hate each other's speakers. That's one of the things you got. When I express my opinions, it's not like, hey, I've tried 3 different flavors of ice cream and banana ripple fudge is the best. Well, there's a lot more flavors to try. I've tried a lot of things. When I build a champ with a toggle power, it's dead quiet. If I use the pot switch and wire the mains properly, it hums as you turn it up. Fuse hot, switch neutral, it's quiet. Safe traditional remedy? Well, buddy, with an H, it is a terrible, terrible circuit using the AC going over to the volume pot, the volume pot being switched. First of all, you're bringing AC with all its ripple straight from the wall right to early in your preamp circuit. So you're going to inject that ripple in there. Second of all, it's a crappy volume pot. The 1 meg with the switch is a crappy volume pot and has nothing below 9 o'clock. It's like click and then nothing, and then it goes on. So old champs are tough because they'll often have that little bitty slider switch for polarity or whatever. When possible, I like to if I were building a tweed champ, I would insist on putting a power switch. I would not use the power built into the volume at all. Fuse hot, switch neutral, it's quiet. That's not safe. You must have your hot fused, and I cannot recommend fusing the neutral because you could have a major fault and your amp will not trip the fuse, and you can die. Do I have any experience with the lauded Analog Man, King of Tone Pedal? Yeah, it sounds really good. I think Analog Man would be the first to tell you that the price is crazy, the availability is crazy, and it's all beyond his control and beyond his expectations. It's a good sounding pedal. I very much noticed there's a gap in the curtain. I left it there. Though I'm keeping an eye on it. If the sun comes out in force, I'll have to close that because it'll be too bright a spot. What is a good alternative to 12AX7s for my Fender Deluxe Reverb amp? Well, in general, you want to use 12AX7s for V1, V2, V4, and V5, and you want to use 12AT7s for V3 and V6. If you want to play around with other tube types for V1 and V2 and V4, you can try 5751s. You can try a 12AY7. I would not try a 12AT or 12AU because those are current amplifier tubes as opposed to voltage amplifier tubes. There's a reason we use AUs and ATs for reverb drivers and phase inverters and other things that swing a lot of current. But you can also play around if you want. I don't know if you want more gain or less gain. You can also play around with pulling V2. If you only ever use a reverb channel, you get a little more gain out of the reverb channel that way. I think Zach was saying yesterday that he pulls V1, so he's only using V2, but he's got 5751 in there, which is which is odd because you're going to get a little bit more gain from pulling V1, but you're going to have about 20%, 30% less gain because you're using 5751. I'm not sure that on paper that makes sense, but he may just have a really particularly good sounding 5751 in V2, and he wants a little more oomph. So pulling V1 does that. That's fine. Well, good, and your answer is correct and succinct, but boring because I didn't get to stick pliers into a power cable with your answer. I have Edison bulbs here, and there's one over there. There's one over there is not even shot. And sometimes I'll turn it on, but I find that my room is too small for it to not be distracting. If my room went back another 6 to 10 feet that way, and I had the bulb back another 6 to 10 feet, I think it'll look good. But Edison bulbs also get really hot. They're very inefficient. I would like to have a modern version of an Edison bulb that had the look, but you could control the intensity and the color and not go through so much wattage. What do I think about converting a Deluxe Reverb tremolo to bias shift like a Princeton versus Opto, Professor Dan asks? Well, I think it's already been done, and it doesn't sound great. If you want to hear that, test drive one of the 64 custom Deluxe Reverbs that Fender has out right now. They're calling it custom because they can't sell the Opto coupler in Europe, so they've just put the Princeton circuit in there. And it sounds okay, but I think the Opto sounds better. At least it is a different sound. I prefer the sound of the Opto, and the Opto does not introduce artifacts or thudding into the output section, which the bias tremolo can very easily. But I would never convert a Deluxe Reverb to bias tremolo. First of all, the Optos, in my opinion, sounds better. Second of all, I'd have to charge someone to do that. I said, no. For less than I'd have to charge you to do that, just buy a tremolo pedal that has Opto and bias and harmonic on it. Get a used Strymon Flint if you don't want to get one of the latest and greatest, and give you a result better than actually physically converting the amp, and then you wouldn't have paid for a practically useless mod to the amp. Hey, sent to me. Hey, Maz Greg, recently acquired a 63 Deluxe Reverb. Nice. The previous owner replaced the 25 microfarad bypass caps with 8 microfarad. Should I put those back to original value? Thanks. Love the show. Thank you. Appreciate that. Some of them you should. 8 microfarad is going to have plenty of low end on V1 and V2A. Same for the reverb driver. The issue is for V1B, V2B, and V4, where you have shared cathodes. If those cathodes are not fully bypassed, you will have issues. You can have oscillation, you can have phase shift, you can have all kinds of woes. So 22 is as small as I would go for V1B/V2B and for V4A and B. At least 22. For the others, I go down to 4.7 all the time quite happily. But that's the important thing. And also the reverb driver V3 needs to be at least 10 microfarad because that's also a parallel cathode. So yeah, you should definitely go to go to 25 or 22 for the two that are the one that's on across the 820 connected to V1B and V2B, and for the one across the 820 on V4. And for the second one on V5B, keep it at 8. But if you do change it down to a 4.7 or 5, and you'll get a better response from your intensity, your speed pot. Hope that helps. I wonder if a small coil fan could serve as a replacement to the load of a bulb. I don't think that'd be as fun to have on the bench, and I'm not sure that you'd be able to, whether it'd be able to convert all of the power, whereas the light pretty much does, but I'd have to look into that. It's not a bad idea. I could make something which had the same effect. I could make something that lit up an LED the same way, but I don't want to have to make something complicated if I can just get a light bulb. And I just got that. I've made them out of electrical boxes for $3 from Home Depot before. That's a little powered outlet strip that clamps to the desk that I got from Amazon, and I just took the back off and wired it so that the first socket would be going series for the hot versus a traditional wiring on that first socket. Because I knew that that's what I wanted to use, and I knew that I didn't want to have a big box sitting on my desk anymore just for that one thing. What are my thoughts on the Simple Pro Junior? The horrible things. Get rid of it, sell it. What an insulting thing for Fender to sell to you and then to call it Pro. It is garbage. It is flimsy. It is designed to fail, and the very definition of the planned obsolescence. It is a landfill thing that just hasn't taken that trip yet. What an awful, awful thing for Fender put on the market. Sorry. Oh, Mojotone's got a high watt kit. That's cool. I wasn't sure about that. I don't keep up with the kits very often. For some reason, I don't feel the need. But that's good to know they've got one. I bet it's a good one. Thank you, Christina. Appreciate that. Like watching a baseball game after dinner with a scotch. You're saying it puts you to sleep too easily. Let's see. Also, the 63 Deluxe Reverb has no grid stoppers on the power tubes. I assume that we should install some 1500 1.5K resistors there. When you have a 63, trying to make as few changes to the original as possible, because if the amp came from the factory without them, then odds are the red and yellow wires from the phase inverter output to pins, in this case pins 5 on the output tubes, may not be long enough to reach over to pin 1. If you do add them and the wires are not long enough to reach over to pin 1, so you can mount the 1.5Ks across the tube, then put the you can try some 1.5Ks going up in the air like you'd find on a Marshall. So you'd have I'll use this tube. Here's the tube base, and here's, in this case, the grid. You just have the resistor going up in the air like that, and then the wire going there. So the wire's going right there. You may or may not find any benefit. It depends on how electrically noisy your environment is. You're unlikely to have oscillation in the amp, but if you do, that could be a fix for that. But it can also just keep out electrical hash that's in the environment, and then as our electrical environments get noisier and noisier. So if you're in Chicago, yeah. If you're in the middle of Montana, probably not, but I don't know where you're at. I actually said you're in England, so you're probably not in Chicago or Montana. But it's up to you. If you observe issues with the amp, try it. If you don't have any issues with it as built, leave those solder joints original, if and you want. Do I smoke salmon? No, it's too hard to get them to light. I hate fish, especially salmon. Salmon and tuna and eel. Ooh, oily, fatty, yucky, fishy things. People are like, it's not very fishy. Like, it tastes like fish. It smells like fish. It's fishy. How bad does something have to be before they admit that fishy is a negative? Do I have any idea how the master volume on a Gretsch affects the impedance and tone of the pickups? Yeah, real good ideas. Gretsch wiring is kind of horrible. They ignore all kinds of common sense, and those pickups can sound better than they do in Gretsch's, because you have a whole bunch of parallel things and very noisy. Potentially, if you roll all the volumes down, because then you don't have nothing's muting the input of your amp. But those pickups are so freaking bright that they kind of get away with it. But how it affects it's going to depend on the particular Gretsch, particular year, in which pickups. So like Filtrons and the older ones are very different in such ways. Hey, Bill, I don't know what Top Hat's best 1x12 Marshallish amp would be, because I've not kept up with their entire lineup. I would just look at the website, see what models interest you, see if you can find a place that has them and try them. Because it can be a fantastic amp, and on paper do everything you want and not be the right amp for you. Or it may just make your left toe curl up just right, and then you have to have it. I don't know, but they're well worth seeking out to try. Also, and hopefully lastly, the PI plate load resistors both 100K. Should I change one to 82K like the AB763? Thanks a million. You may have an AA763 Deluxe, and you may have a transition that's a little bit AA763 and AB. Or you may have the even rare You may. I wouldn't change an original resistor in that amp if you're sure that it's original, unless it's a problem. So 100K, 100K, I've seen that in the AA 763s. And there aren't a lot of original 63 deluxe reverbs out there. So, in my hope for a 63 would be that, aside from screen grids and electrolytics, everything else in the amp should be as original as possible. And so that's why I would suggest to you to try to maintain it the way it was, because there's literally a jillion AB763 deluxe reverbs out there. If you have a 63 that's a little bit funky, a little bit different, embrace the funk. Yeah, I thought it was implied in the fact that we call it a light bulb limiter, but yeah, you're right. I should be more specific. Good. Hey, Wrecking Crew, for tube amp design and longevity, do I prefer the tubes be on the top of the chassis or the bottom? Heat is no bueno, so while both work, I've always thought tubes on top make more sense. Tubes up top make more sense. Tubes on bottom aren't always a problem. It depends on how many tubes, how hot it's getting, what the airflow is like. So I've very rarely had problems with Fenders, even a twin or Showman with the whole quad of 6L6s. I've very often found problems in Marshalls where the 34s or 6550s charred the sockets in the surrounding area, even though they're going up. It's not just the heat flow, it's not just the direction of the orientation. EL34s are more problematic than 6L6s, for instance, in terms of being prone to failure and having the screens take them out. But in general, I would not want to have the tube sideways, like in an AC30. And I would not design an amp to have hang down tubes which are relatively unprotected, like in an old Tweed Bassman or a Champ, if I were designing. But if I were designing an amp and the choice was whether it was going to be like a Marshall where the tubes are going up or a Deluxe Reverb where the tubes are going down, both cases there's lots of airflow. Both cases the tubes are protected. And in both cases, everything is laid out in such a way that the plates aren't facing each other on the tubes and there's a sufficient space between them. It would come down to what I find is more convenient for the player. For instance, on the Excalibur, I had the tubes hanging down because I was wanted to be able to do a head cab or a combo with a front panel access, and so I wanted the combo and the head to match. So for the head version, the controls are up top, and for the head version, or sorry, the combo version, the controls are also top. So that way you don't have to. I don't want to have the controls beneath the speaker in a combo, and I didn't want to flip the whole thing around between the head and the combo, which is common. And also, if you reach over to the combo to the head version, it's nice to hear that I can see all the knobs. They're not kind of hidden by the reveal of the wood on the valence. And so I knew that the trade-off was going to have the tubes hanging down. Well, it's 3 preamp tubes and two EL84s. It's not a ton of heat, and everything was managed. So from the user's perspective, it's much easier to reach the knobs in that combo or that head where the tubes are hanging down. If I were building a high watt, I'd be like, well, sorry, the chassis is going to be on the bottom, and I'm not going to build a combo version of that amp because it would weigh 800 pounds. So there are, while tubes radiating up is best, them pointing down is not necessarily bad. All right, we're coming up to the top of the hour. We're going to take a 7-minute break, and then we'll come back to Telemann 1800s question. And when we go to the intermission, some of you lucky so-and-sos are going to get a commercial, which will probably suck, that I do not endorse, but I need to pay the rent. So here we go. See you guys in 7 minutes. And we're back. Because when I speak very loudly, or even normally when I come back from these intermissions, someone invariably has a heart attack. I said somebody. Let's get back to these questions here. Teleman 1800. Hey, when soldering, is it always best to run hot and fast, or is any time I run low and slow? Slow and low, that is the tempo. No, always hot and fast. You want to heat things as efficiently as possible without overheating them. There are times when even running hot, depending on, like, if you have some massive turret with a whole bunch of connections, it still can take a while, but you want to be as fast as possible while doing a proper job. Hey, Christina, no one wants them. They're too big and heavy for most people these days. Most gigs, you get a twin, you can't turn it over two anyway, and it's 80 pounds plus, and I love the sound of a twin. There's just not a lot of places allow you to really use one these days, because it's not going to really wake up to get to like 3.5, and that's really loud. But I'll take them. If anyone's got any twins that just laying around, send them here. Have I ever used a coffee cup with a small handle, and after I take a sip, I pull my hand back and the cup comes with it and sloshes coffee all over? Once, that's why I don't do that anymore. If someone hands me a small cup with a small handle, I don't try to do the little dainty thing. I just grab the mug. That's the way. That is the way. Hey, Andy, 1966, thanks for joining us. Lou's going back. He's going to give his mom lunch. That's good of you, Lou. And Teleman 1800. I appreciate you putting the question marks there. Please, everyone, only ask any question once, because I see it twice, and I think I've scrolled wrong in the feed, and I get disoriented. I will get to everyone's question in order, I promise, except for if I miss one, in which case that happens, and I apologize. There was a Mark, we were commenting on his last name, Frith, 2 weeks ago, asked a really great question about his 62 AC15, and I didn't see it until afterwards, and I keep hoping he'll come back and I can answer it then. Tor bought his White Whale guitar 2 days ago, 1969 ES 335. I'll be buried with this guitar. Very good. Mine's here, but it's behind a camera stand, a tripod, so I can't reach it out of solidarity with you. But congratulations. Don't they smell nice? They just smell so good. And Adrian's going to get that 335 if he's patient. Well, Andy High Tides, good luck with your 64 Bandmaster. Should be a good choice for most gigs. Let's see. Only 2 years to go on the King of Tone pedal list. Yeah. Hey, that's not on Analog Man. That's on the internet versus small ability to do small scale production. Any opinion on early 70s 100-watt Bassman versus 65 50-watt? Yeah, the 65 era sounds better. I'm not as big a fan of the 70s Bassman. I mean, they're good amps. They're good amps, but they're not anything special like the late 50s and 60s ones are. There's nothing wrong with the early 70s 100-watt Bassman. It's just not the same amount of character. Victor's going to go watch his granddaughter's dance performance. Very nice. With your grandsons as well. Good, Victor. Let's see. Fletch's 40 says, I have 3 Laneys, a 1x10, a 1x12, and a 2x12. Which one do I sell? I don't know. I don't know which models they are. I don't know which ones you like the sounds of the best. Uh, I am Laney agnostic. What do I think about hybrid amps, like a tube preamp and a solid-state preamp? Well, I believe that they exist, and I know that they exist. I have seen them. I have heard them sound really good. I've heard them sound really bad. But as a category, they are just fine with me. I think you might actually be better off doing the hybrid the other way with a tube power amp and solid-state preamp, like an some old PVs and music peoples. Yeah, it's not likely that the limiter bulb will burn out, but it's on my bench and snippets of wire go flying, or if I were to let go of a screwdriver in just the right way, I could see the bulb shattering. So I've got some spares. I need to get a whole bunch more spares just because it's glass and I'm a klutz. Let's see. Omelet Socks. Hey, Omelet Socks. My friend found a 77 Vibro Champ in his attic, all original, but all the wires and most parts are covered in mold. Will it be fine if I clean it off? Or is there anything to watch out for? P.S. The cloth transformer wires are covered in mold. I'm not sure if that will catch fire. Well, first of all, you need to make sure, before you even consider powering that thing up, you would want to change out the electrolytics. But before you even get that far, this is going to sound crazy, but seriously, go buy an entire thing of isopropyl alcohol from Walgreens or CVS or whoever sells such things in your neighborhood. This is the stuff I use most of the time. It's what I'd use for this purpose. And, and just pour it, just soak every part of that amp in this stuff. And then follow that up with a little brush. You can get a little... Get these little cheap brushes at most hardware stores for like 50 cents. You get a pack of 3 for $1. And between this and that, just brush on every surface and then go in there with some paper towels and wipe off the worst of it. And repeat the alcohol flush and leave it out in the driveway in the sun for an afternoon. And try to get a handle on most of the yuck. Get most of the yuck out. Then look at electrolytic caps and then maybe try to power it on. Because those caps are going to be shot and mold is not good. And you can't bleach an amp. And, just cleaning with distilled water won't do anything. But the alcohol is a pretty safe bet. But you don't want to have any moisture from the wet alcohol in that amp when you eventually apply power. So it'll all evaporate out in a few hours in the sun. That's what I'd try, but I would not put too much money or effort into a 77 Vibro Champ. Hey, Scott, thank you very much. Thoughts on a voltage regulator in front of a silver-faced Vibrolux reverb? Well, if you want to. Most silver-faced era fenders work fine with 120 volts coming out of the wall. So there's not really a need to do... Oh, I assume you mean not a voltage regulator, but like a brown box or a variac. You never need a voltage regulator with any amplifier unless you're a massive touring band who's going to be getting power from a generator, in which case they have great big expensive boxes that will take whatever the incoming AC from the generator is and clean it up and give a steady output of whatever they select. But those are $4,000 or $5,000 units. That's not a thing that you'd use just for a Vibrolux reverb. So it's fine if you want to have a Vibrolux reverb with a variac or brown box and keep it at 117 or 114. It's fine. But typically a 70s Fender is going to be fine with 120 volts mains or 240 or 230, depending on where you live in the world. You just make sure you bias it for the voltage that you expect to use it with. What is my favorite Dead song to play on guitar? Well, you are asking the absolutely wrong person, Christine. I'm sorry. I used to go every week, meet a bunch of friends, and we all play acoustic from like 8 o'clock at night to 2 o'clock in the morning every Thursday. It was great. I miss those people. I miss playing that. And a lot of them were Dead fans, and they start a Dead song, and I go get a beer. If I had to play one, if someone put a gun to your head, to my head, and said, "You must play a Grateful Dead song," I'd probably choose "Friend of the Devil," because I could hear someone talented doing it as opposed to the Dead. But I can't stand the Dead songs. I would just pretend that I was doing a Dan Tyminski song. And I know that I probably burnt some bridges out there. It's fine if you like the Dead. I mean, they sound like the Muppet Band, but without the sense of humor. But it's fine if you like that. Hey, JSIC has got a 68 reissue Deluxe. I'm sorry. I replaced all the caps, fixed the loop on the reverb tube, and it's still quite noisy, even with no guitar input or tank connected. What else can I do? See my video on how to denoise them. You have to lose the reverb and tremolo on channel 1, or there's a different way to do it, but primarily, first, just do what I show in that video and make it back into being a 65. The 65 is a really good circuit. The 68 is a bad circuit. Overpromises, under-delivers, and the noise is just because of the way they do a DC mix stage, because there was no engineering there. It was just something, hey, if we make these quick and dirty mods, we can market this as a custom thing. I mean, the damn things are noisy and unreliable. So, well, then I'll do it as a Lyle cover, couldn't? But I cannot stand any of their other materials. I was going for a smoke, John, but I'm not supposed to say that on YouTube. I do 3 hours every Saturday. Twice I step outside and get a little sanity break and mentally psych myself up to be this guy. Because I'm not this guy the rest of the week. I'm just some guy sitting there going, where did that diode go? You know. But I've got to put on some kind of personality for you guys, and so once an hour I just give myself a personality prop. Yeah, probably the Roach in that case, Maz Greg. I think keep it as original as possible. And I just saw you did a super chat. I appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and answer your super chat now. Usually I answer all questions in the sequence that come in, even super chats, but it happens to be on the screen right in front of me. Right, I've got Maz Greg here on my screen for you guys, and then I've got the chat and the sequence that it came in here, and over here I've got where it is now. So I see Maz Greg's super chat pertaining to this. He says, should I leave the bias supply alone on the 63 Deluxe? It is functioning properly. Thank you again. I would change the electrolytic capacitor, certainly. I would probably leave the original resistor if it's still in spec. Should be 470 ohms. Might be something different in the AA 763. The one thing I would change the diode though, because I have seen the diodes in the 60s Fenders begin to fail, and it's such an inexpensive part. And you can remove the original in such a way that it can be put back if a future owner wants to have it. But if that diode were to fail and you lost your bias, you could lose output tubes. It could be very expensive output tubes. You could damage your output transformer. That's one of the core things that makes that a valuable amp. So I wouldn't want to endanger your output tubes or your output transformer because you wanted to retain one old diode, and a new high quality 1 in 4007 is going to cost 15 cents at the prices individuals would pay. I think I probably have about 3 cents invested in each diode. To me, preserve the transformer, change the diode. Take the gun, leave the cannoli. Wait, go back, reverse that. Okay. Let's see. Hey, Bottom Kitchen. Have I noticed varying thicknesses of the copper control panel? I was surprised when I saw one for myself. Not really, no. They might have had a couple different suppliers, but they wanted them all to be pretty thin because they didn't want to have any real change in where they used, for the most part, they use all the same pots with the same bushing length. And so you want to have, all right, here's the pot, the bushing length, and want a tooth washer and the hardware on the other side, and the knobs we like. We want to make sure that and we have control over the chassis thickness. We don't want the copper panel thickness to vary too much. Otherwise, you could run into production issues. The coffee princess just appeared in the crack of the curtains. Was Nikki spying on us? I don't think you guys deserve to have her on the channel. You just stuck with this face. John Licari has many clean service vintage Fender heads and combos. My advice: how to market. I'm not the person to ask about sales. I'm not a salesperson. I would contact people who are good at that. I would contact Carter Vintage or Chicago Music Exchange, etc., or just someone, maybe some regional dealers, and see if they have any ideas. I just don't keep up with that side of things, because if I get into all that, then I would have conflicts of interest with my own clients. And so I want to just 100% be on the side of my clients and say it's worth it because it's worth it, or it's not worth it. I don't want to ever have someone think that, oh, he told me it wasn't worth it. He gave me $300 for the old thing, and then he turned around and sold it for $3,000. I just don't want that to be a possibility. So I don't sell amps. I don't get into that game. Sorry. Let's see. Yeah, it does smell amazing. Yeah, I love the way a good guitar smells. Yeah, another reason not to like the Dead. Have I ever used the JJ EL844 for early breakup or just marking? I probably had an amp with them. I don't recall. I wouldn't worry about it. I mean, they're gonna be okay. They're gonna work or they're not. You're gonna like it or you don't. I've just not. I don't. If I've heard them, I don't remember hearing them. And I don't think I've. I don't. I know I've never ordered them specifically. How tight should the screws be for the main board on old Fenders without stressing the board? I get them as tight as I can with one hand, like that. I'm not using a socket wrench, but I want them not to vibrate loose. And the fiber boards, because remember, there's two fiber boards that are stacked together, those compress a little bit, and so by the time when that screw is tight, the boards are pushing up, and that screw won't back out very easily. You don't want to. It would be possible to just keep tightening it until it just enlarged the hole in the fiber board. You don't want to do that, but when it stops at the fiber board, and then like maybe eighth of a turn, quarter turn past that, I just don't want that to ever vibrate, because if it vibrates, the screw could back out. If it has enough downward pressure on the fiber boards are also pushing up on it, and that screw is less likely to vibrate. I don't have pounds per square inch torque measurement to give you for that, sorry. Hey, sent to me on his JTM45 kit amp. It has a 4018025 output transformer, 3-point K ohm. Can I swap the KT66s with EL34s or GL606 GCs without any other mods? Yeah, you can. You can swap. Just make rebias, and then once you do the swap, also play around with deliberately mismatching the output transformer. You may find that EL34s you like 3.6K at 8 ohms, but the 6L6s you like 3.6K at 16 or 4. It's safe to offset by 1. Play around with that. All these things there's the data sheet which says this is the optimal range, and as long as you're not like mismatching 4 to 16 or something crazy like that, what sounds good to you. And that's a real sturdy output transformer. It's a real simple amp. 3.6K is kind of traditionally in the range for most EL34s, but any of those would be fine. Thanks, sent to me. I appreciate that. You're always giving me money, man. And I need to get in touch with you. You're in town or nearby. Yeah, the 900s, many of them are kind of because they've got basically one or two overdrive pedals built in with some little red LEDs. And there's that super chat from Maz Greg. Thank you very much, Maz Greg. But I did answer that before. For those of you who might have joined us in a minute, I'm not just like, thanks for the money, man. Skip the question. I answered the question about 10 minutes ago, I think. Hey, Michael, hello. The toggle switch on my guitar when I go to the neck pickup goes mute. Should I file the contactors or spray for the rust? Well, if you have rust, you need to replace the switch. And I don't know which guitar you have, but in general, if I run into that problem, there are two things I check. First of all, is the switch physically opening? It does have good contacts. I'll use contact cleaner for that. I use Caig Deoxit, C-A-I-G Deoxit, D5, making sure that none of that gets on the finish. But it's also very common, especially in a Gibson, which has a typical or Gibson style where the humbuckers have braided covers, that the braid, if the switch gets a little bit loose and moves, the braid can be contacting something it should not. So you could have, you may just have the ground touching the ground of the shielded braid contacting the positive for the neck pickup. And so you think it's a problem with the switch. It's actually that the switch is moved and the wire just needs to be moved around. Without seeing your guitar, I can't tell you more. And hopefully you don't actually have rust. Rust is pretty rare on switches. If you actually physically have rust on a switch, get the switch changed, because once the rust starts, it's going to be a problem in a guitar, and it's not worth fighting. If it's some valuable old guitar, lovingly take the switch out, put it in a little bag, put it in the back of the little pocket of the case, and then put a real switch in there that you can gig with. Hey, Daniel James. Yeah, actually, USBs can be very convenient with apps, not only because they can give you some protection and a little bit of filtering, but also a lot of UPSs, you can configure the mains power to be like, all right, it's always going to be 120, or it's always going to be 110. So it's like having a built-in variac. And it's going to regulate and be pretty much always 110 or pretty much always 120, because if the voltage from the wall goes up, it charges the battery. If the voltage from the wall goes down, it draws from the battery. When you do these things, you have to make sure that you're not drawing too much current or asking too much current of the device. So you have to make sure you have a UPS that's rated for 5 to 10 amps to do this. But it is a very good option. And sometimes you can get a little 5 amp, 10 amp UPS supply with a switchable 110, 120 volt output for like 80 to 100 bucks, and it's a lot less expensive than a brown box. It's not a thing to gig with because, like, they're computer beige typically. They're still like 90s office space cosmetics, but functionally they can be great. When sending a signal, hey Joe, through an amplifier, are there specific places in the amp I check first to shortcut the process, or do I run through the whole schematic? I'm not sure what you mean. Typically, if everything looks like it ought to be working, I just plug into the input and I have speakers connected, and I see if I hear anything. If at that point I don't hear anything, I will typically measure voltages, which will tell me if we have a bad component or a dead tube. Like if I go and measure all the plates and cathodes of the amp, and I'll say I'm on a Fender Deluxe Reverb, and I've got no sound out of either channel, the first thing I know is that if I don't have sound out of either channel, then I've probably got a problem in the phase inverter. And I'll check the cathode and the plates and say, what if I'm measuring that? And that's okay. That seems like the plate voltage is really high, like 300, 400 volts there. I'm going to change out the phase inverter tube. Okay, now the plate voltage is 250 and I can hear it when I measure it. It had a bad tube. If I only have sound out of one channel, say the normal channel makes sound, but Reverb channel doesn't. And then I've got to look at V2 or V4 typically. And that, again, hey, all right, on V2, the cathode is at 3 volts versus 1.5 volts or whatever. Well, I mean, but the plate for pin 1 is at 350 volts, and plate for pin 6 is at 200 volts. It tells me pin 1 may not be working in the tube, or the plate resistor may be bad. That's how I do it with voltage. Voltage and knowing how the circuit works. If I have a circuit that I don't know from Adam, I will still go in and just do the voltage because I'm like, okay, these are all 12A whatever, so ATs, AXs, AYs. I'll measure pins 1, 6, 3, and 8 on each tube, write them down. Hey, that looks weird. Or often, if I'm doing this with an amp on a speaker connected, I can hear it. I'm measuring the voltage, and if all of a sudden I measure a plate and I don't hear it out of the amp, that tells me that something's wrong in that section. Hopefully that helps. Hit the wrong button twice. Hey, John Jankowski. He built a 6G7A bandmaster with a harmonic tremolo. Everything works, but the tremolo doesn't start until 5 on the intensity. Any suggestions to improve this colder bias, lower the 8.2 meg to 4.7? That's tricky. I don't know what... it may be that you have the wrong taper on the intensity pot. You could very easily just have the wrong taper on the intensity pot. I don't know if you've got linear audio or reverse audio on there. And I don't recall that schematic well enough in my head right now. I know the later and the earlier amp is much better than the early 60s stuff. Because Fender was trying so many different variations in the early 60s, like 61 through 63. Given the nature of that circuit, I would either expect you have a weak preamp tube that's doing the tremolo, or you have the wrong taper pot. I hope you made enough for the entire class tour. I love cannoli, but I love real cannoli so much. The cannoli in Memphis is, people sell these things with nasty excuses for chocolate chips, and it's basically frosting inside. It's not what a cannoli is supposed to be. And to the bakeries of America, this may apply to parts of Canada as well. Probably not Montreal or Quebec, but if you're making eclairs don't need whipped cream and a cherry. And sorry to tell you this, pain au chocolat does not need to have whipped cream or ganache or whatever the hell you're calling a ganache. So many bad pastries in American bakeries. It's depressing. Hey, Wrecking Crew, I have not pursued that thought because I'm afraid that Fender might be litigious, and I just can't afford to even get in that kind of squabble with them. They're a big, big company. Even if I would be in the right, getting there would be difficult. Brad has got his FYM Marshall boards for the Jason 2000s. He's got the advantage, A, that Marshall is no longer producing those, or he's not in competition with Marshall. B, he's in Australia. It's a different legal system. I'm right here in the same legal system with Fender, and so I think I would probably get shut down. Fender has never been too shy of sending cease and desists, and I would be afraid that I would system decease. 10 meg RA. Well, it could have just a bad pot, but I'd also check the tubes for. You might have a weak tube somewhere in the circuit there, John. Maz Greg, I'm sorry. I thought I must have mistaken you with someone else earlier in the chat who's coming in from England. Sorry about that. Well, if you're just east of Dallas, then my earlier advice did apply. You probably, depending on how far east of Dallas, you may benefit from having the suppressor grids, the grid stoppers. I didn't know there was a recent bloom in interest for KT77s. I don't pay attention to all the forums and the stuff, all the influencers. I remain relatively uninfluenced. Christina just picked up a 70 Hammond B3. Nice, with Leslie and a tone cab. It works. Are the amps in both cabinets the same as guitar amps? Do I ever work on these types of amps? They're very similar. They're very similar in operation to Fenders of the same period, that they're built more like a bit more like an Ampeg. And I have worked on those types of amps. It's a lot of wires to keep track of because they have this chassis connected to this chassis, and big wiring harnesses. But yeah, they are fantastic things. And the nice thing is on those Hammonds, they have modular filter caps, a lot of the power sections. So it's pretty easy to, you can't hot swap it, but you can change the filter caps on those pretty easily. I love B3s unless I have to play them. I mean, lift them or service them. Some of the stuff involved in servicing them is tricky. Nikki, bless her heart, did not divorce me, even though I had a Leslie cab in the front room for about 3 months. And I was rebuilding the motor for it. What do I use to determine how much to increase the grid's resistors? Well, you can do it. You can do it with math, or you can just try some things to see what you like. I have been known to put temporarily put pots into circuits wired as a variable resistor and turn it till I like the sound of. I'll figure what the minimum is. I'll put the minimum in series with the pot, so I can't go below that, and just turn it until I hear what I like, and then I'll write it down, and then I'll see if there's some justification for it. Math is predictive of what is safe. It's not always predictive of what will sound or feel the best. So if I know I'm in the safe range, say if I know it's going to be between like 47K and 500K, I'll put a 47K resistor in series with a 500K pot and turn it. And if there's voltage, I'll expect some DC noise as I turn it, and I'll make sure that my hand's behind my back, and I may even put a plastic knob on the part and give it some mechanical support while I'm turning it. But it's sometimes faster just to try it and see. Yeah, if you have a B3, you're going to need those dollies. You need to say, hello, dolly. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate that, man. That's very kind of you. Iyad Sultan opened up a 5-way Ibanez switch that was crazy rusty, hard to get a replacement where he lives. I had to make it work. Guitar is still noisy. I checked all grounds. Yeah, once you get rust in there, sometimes you're just not going to be able to make good contact. I'm sorry. The good news about the Ibanez, well, actually, the Ibanez might be a standard, depending on the year, it might be a standard metric thing. But I understand that availability across the world changes a lot. And hell, most Ibanez players are just going to keep it on the bridge. You might just hardwire it. Hey, it's got all these pickups. Only the bridge is active. This 5-way doesn't do anything. Or you could maybe make it into a kill switch. Hey, Anthony. Calderisi, any thoughts on modern EF86 tubes versus new old stock used vintage? Just bought a 65 AC10 twin, has original molar tubes throughout except the EF86. Yeah, and I did a video on this. The old ones killed the current productions. The current productions are pretty much limited to JJ and electroharmonics, and they're okay. You can make music with them, but compared to old ones, they're just nowhere near as good, both in terms of tone and how the circuit actually behaves, which probably interlinked, but not the same thing. But microphonics are the problems. So it doesn't matter if you've got a bugle boy or a tongue drum that sounds fantastic if you hear if someone's walking 3 rooms away because the thing goes ping, ping. You never want it to be the machine that goes ping. But in my testing, the current production stuff is not as good, specifically on EF86s. There are other tube types where you'd be hard-pressed to tell the difference between, say, a good quality Electro-Harmonix 7025 or tongue saw and an old RCA in certain circuits in certain places. Hey, would stainless steel be okay for a chassis material? It's okay. It has big problems. It's really hard to machine. It's extremely difficult to put holes into or do screws if you're not doing it in a machine shop. It can have some issues being non-ferrous, and it can have some issues with shielding performance, but I'm not a metallurgist. I would not choose stainless steel unless I was having a company make 1,000 chassis for me. And I knew that the demand was there to sell them because it's more expensive to have them made in stainless steel. There are, I think Mojave amps used to have stainless steel chassis, and they were gorgeous, but they're heavy, and good luck if you ever need to modify one. You'll eat your bits. Hey, Jeff. Good to see you, man. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, man. The Claire's especially, because a cannoli can last even in the refrigerator, but yeah, nothing worse when the cannoli tastes like it's made of chalk, like sugar, powdered sugar, chalk kind of texture, or that they put something in there to emulsify it. And it clears, with any choux pastry, it goes from delicious to stale like that. And the fillings should be real. No Boston cream, no vanilla pudding, no Twinkie crap. Ugh. What are my thoughts on the Fender Pro Sonic? They're awful amps. So many issues. Better than the Supersonics, but the Pro Sonics, bizarre choices in the reverb circuit that just made them very noisy. Now they have different. The earlier ones are noisier. The later ones they fix those issues, but they still have big problems with the way the effects loop is implemented. Fender has never made a good complicated amp. Whenever they have, hey, this one changes channels. Hey, this one's got an effects loop. Hey, this one's got this. They never get it right. If you want a Fender amp, go to their strengths. And it doesn't have to be expensive. You can get a used 65 reissue Princeton and be thrilled. Same thing for used Deluxe Reverb. Some of the used 65 reissue Twins and Super Reverbs are incredible steals because no one wants an amp that big or heavy. And most people buy on the internet, no one wants to pay shipping for an amp that big and heavy. So if you can find one local to you, you can get a great deal. Fenders, even their good, simple, modern ones like the Deluxe Reverb and the Princeton, they hamper by putting terrible speakers in them from the factory typically, but that's $7,500 away from pure sonic satisfaction. But the Pro Sonics, the Hot Rods, the Celsiors, the Supersonics, avoid all these things. The Death Cannoli Polka. Well, if you went to Italy and came away with polka, you're really doing things wrong. Hey, Randy. Oh, man. Going in-ears. Good luck. It pays okay for New York. Man, does anything pay enough for New York? I love New York, but I'd be terrified to live there. Not for crime or anything. Just I would be afraid I'd get evicted because something would fall through and then everything escalates. It's just such an expensive place. But man, when I'm in New York or London, I feel like I'm at the beating center of the world. I'm sure Tokyo is like that too, only much more polite. Probably fewer beatings in Tokyo as well. Holy cow. Either we are really got a lot. Yeah, Jeff, man. Well, you don't live in Manhattan, at least. You're smart enough to live in Brooklyn. I would love to be able to be your neighbor. But, it is a gamble. it is a big gamble to be able to get there, and I've not been able to take such gambles in my life. You did for 20 years, man. Yeah, I love Manhattan and I love Brooklyn. I have not had any time in the Bronx or Queens, well, aside from going to JFK. Um, but man, I love being in Manhattan and I love walking around Brooklyn. Um, I just know that what I do for a living typically does not pay well enough for that. I know some guys who do what I do who've worked, even had shops in Manhattan, and man, they have had to charge out the ass for their hourly rates because they got to keep the lights on, and the leases and anywhere in Manhattan are insane, and even in Queens, man. And Randy's in Harlem. Yeah, my buddy Doug lives up in Harlem too. I would love to be able to be there. If I could afford to be there, I would be there. But I'm afraid that I'd be one of those guys living 50 miles away on the train every day, and that would not have the same appeal to me. If I were there, I'd want to be there. Of course, I'd probably just live off Bleecker Street pizza every day. I'm on the Tube Depot site, and they're not bothering with gold pins. Which JJ12X7 do I order? Hey, Robbie, just get the JJ ECC 83s and just order sort of for low gain and microphonics. That's all you need. All the JJs are roll of high gains, and JJ doesn't sell 12X7. They sell ECC 83s because they use the European nomenclature. So just pay the little dollar per tube and have Tube Depot sort them for low noise and microphonics, and you'll be good to go. I have no thoughts on Kowalski amps from Texas, Steve. Sorry, I've never heard of it. Hope it's fantastic. Hope you love it, but I've never heard one. I can't pretend to know things I don't. That's what the rest of the internet's for. More people, more suck, you think, Mark? Now, the thing about New York is the more people, the freer you are, because no one knows who you are. No one gives a fuck who you are. No one pays any attention to you. You walk down the street in Memphis, you walk down the street, even in parts of Chicago, you're going to, you'll get noticed. You will not be fully anonymous. You walk down the street, you walk down 7th Avenue, man, ain't nobody got time for you. No one pays attention to you. You are totally free. You are a leaf on the wind. And there's some really good bakeries over there, speaking of which. Let's see. Hey, James, got an AC15C1 on the way from a dealer that purchased a 4 model for $700. Am I taking these? Later, I might. I don't advise shipping AC15s because they're very, very expensive and because they're so heavy. And removing just the chassis, that's doable. But I would say enjoy the amp as is for a good long while. Make sure it is an amp that gets you 99% of the way with what you want, and that is the right choice for you. And then consider maybe having some work done to make it last longer after the warranty expires, or to change this or that aspect. But I would never advise someone to buy an amp and then ship it to me and then ship it back to them because they might like the sound changes I make, because that's, an 80-pound amp when it's boxed up. That's easily $200 to $250 just in shipping alone. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. When you're in New York or London or even Paris, I'll be gracious and include Paris in this. You are totally free because you cannot offend. You cannot be freakish because nothing you can do can compete with the guy who they just got off the subway with. No one's looking at you. No one's judging you. And my God, the restaurants, you could, in New York or London, you could eat a cuisine from a different country every day of the year and never repeat unless you wanted to. It's fantastic. And in Memphis, it's hard enough to find American restaurants worth eating at. Ah, man. All right, we are coming up in about 9 minutes to the second intermission. And this is a first. Either we have a lot fewer people here where I've been answering questions much faster. Usually I've got another hour's worth of questions already asked that I haven't gotten to. So I don't know. Hey, New York City geology. Grew up in the Bronx back when it's more rough than it is now. Yeah, New York is way safer than it was. Way safer than it was. New York's not dangerous if you know where. If you have any street smarts, there are parts of any city you don't go to unless you live there and know what's up. Same thing here in Memphis. There are places in Memphis that I don't go to. I was talking about this with Nikki last week or 2 weeks ago. People think Memphis is so full of crime and and they call it the murder capital and all that. It's because they come here and they go to Graceland, and that's all they do. So Graceland is about a mile from the airport. It's surrounded by industrial parks, and it is on one of the worst streets of the entire city. It is 15 miles from, practically from the real city. It's 10 miles south of the city, easily. And it is just one of the worst. Elvis Presley Boulevard is one of the worst streets in the entire city. And if your only experience in Memphis is you go to Graceland and you stay in one of those overpriced Graceland Elvis adjacent themed hotels there, and you're afraid to leave your hotel room because you think that's Memphis, my God, no. I mean, I don't know what the analogy is for other cities, but it'd be like thinking that all of LA was Watts during the riot of '68. The rest of Memphis is great for the most part. There are bad neighborhoods, neighborhoods everywhere, but use your smarts. I've walked down Fifth Avenue from like 42nd Street all the way down to Union Square at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I never felt in danger. Now, I wouldn't do that necessarily but down by the river, and there are places farther north in Manhattan I wouldn't do that. But you get a spidey sense when you've been in enough cities. You can get anything you want in New York. It just are you willing to pay for it? But most of the stuff we get now from Mauser and DigiKey and other places like that. So FedEx and UPS delivered New York the same way everywhere else. Hey, SA, as both a tech and a player, can I hear differences between Marshall-equipped 5881 versus EL34 amps of the same model? Thinking mostly the 2500 SLX and 4100, 4500. Yeah, they sound different. But they don't. It's not always radically different because the tone stack in those amps don't have a lot of low end. So a lot of the difference that the tubes are capable of representing isn't there. You're not going to get more low end out of the 5881s or 6L6s or 6550s, even though the tube is capable of reproducing more low end. And because those amps in question that you're asking about are so basically overdrive pedals as opposed to real tube circuits, the mids are already shaped in such a way that you're not going to hear the prominence of the potential mid-range prominence of a 34 versus 5881. So I think in those cases, for the 2500 SLX and the 4100, 4500, just stick with 6L6s or 5881s. Most 5881s today are just rebranded 6L6s because they're more rugged, they're less prone to failure, and they cost less than a 34. The output section of those amps is clean. It's a clean output section. Just stick with the 5881 or 6L6. If you have a plexi reissue, 1959 super lead, 1987 lead, or even a 2203, 2204, you can hear the difference in the output tubes a lot more with those. But for the 900s, no, you're not going to hear any difference. You may think you do, because especially if you bought some 6550s and you just paid $400 for a quad of 6550s, you're going to definitely think that you heard it. That's human nature. Hey, Gas, I'm glad you're here. One of the amazing things was when we were in Oxford, and I realized that I could afford to live in a place like Oxford, and it's 50 minutes away from London by train, which tells me that there's a lot of small towns an hour or two outside of central London that I could probably afford. If only they'd let me immigrate, but I have no unique skills. because I absolutely love London and New York, but I absolutely cannot afford it. Hey Rob, Gutierrez. 6G6 question, the tweet, Brown era Deluxe, sorry. When the guitar is plugged into the normal channel with the volume at minimum, I can turn up the volume pot on the bright channel and the guitar signal can be heard faintly. Okay. Well, that could be a couple different things. It could be that you don't have shielding. Um, let's see. Best way to explain this. Could just be the wires are very close to each other and you're just getting a little bleed. And when you really turn the other volume up, you're going to hear it. Um, it could also be that you have a tube, a Russian preamp tube inside the amp, more than one, because sometimes they will have bleed to each other. I think through the B plus. I'm not quite sure what's up with that. It's very prominent with tongue saws and electroharmonics sometimes. But if you're turning the volume pot up a lot on the bright channel and just hearing the guitar signal faintly, that's not anything to worry about. The issue is if you have the if you're plugging in the normal channel volume's off, and turn the bright channel volume up even a little bit and hear quite a bit of the guitar, then you probably have too much bleed that could be interacting negatively. But before you worry about anything inside the amp, roll preamp tubes. You may just have a preamp tube, like say a V1's shared for both channels. I don't recall the 6G3 layout. I think it is. You just may have some bleed from channel to channel within that tube. Yeah, James, like I said, live with it and see if it's an amp that you otherwise love. And then down the road, I'll be glad to talk to you about that. It is possible to remove the chassis fairly easily and send just that, because a chassis in a box this big weighs and costs a lot less to ship than the whole 50-pound amp in a box this big. And it happens when you plug in the bright channel. Yeah, Rob, I would look at rolling preamp tubes just to rule out the simplest thing. Thank you, Rob. Appreciate that. Well, thank you for finding my channel, and I'm glad you like it. And we are going to take the second intermission because my back teeth are floating and I need more coffee. So everyone stretch your legs, get a sandwich, do what you feel. See you back in 7 minutes. And again, I apologize. Some of you lucky so-and-sos will get ads. Wah, wah, wah. Sad trombone. Hello again, we are back. I'm a city guy stuck in a big small town, Jeff. I have small town income and big city soul, so we travel as much as possible. Sorry your internet hiccuped. Try giving it a glass of water, Randy. Do I have an opinion on the Jack White Fender amp? Well, as far as a technical opinion, it's too early to say. I expect within 3 to 5 years they'll begin to drop like Fender flies, but I could be wrong. I think in the immediate thing, the only thing I can say is as one of the absolute ugliest things ever released by Fender with that yellow sheet metal aesthetic. It's just hideous. But, you know, you do you, or you do Jack. I have walked through Bedford-Stuyvesant alone, Gooden, but I walked through Bedford-Stuyvesant in 2017, which is different than 1976. I was actually in Flatbush for the most part of when I was staying in 2017, and I did not see any of the Ghetto Boys at all. I was very disappointed. Hey, Chris R. Fixing up the switching circuit on a bargain JTM 30. Would I suggest anything for the heating issues with thinking relocating valves for 24-volt PC fan fitting off switch circuit? I'm trying to remember the JTM 30. In the JTM 60, they have terrible issues with the way the board kind of slides on a slot, and the diode bridge always burns. And the fix for those amps is to get a 6 or 8 amp chassis mounted switch. Diode bridge, and bolt that to the chassis as a heatsink, and then run wires to the board from there. But I don't recall if the JTM 30 has the same issues. If it does, then the same solution. Move get a big overrated high amperage bridge and chassis mount it and run wires to the board. Best bet for if you have a 60 is to, if it's working, sell it while it's still working, because it's going to fail, and it's going to fail in expensive, nasty, pointy ways. But I'm not as familiar with the JTM 30, sorry. I'm glad it was super cheap. But again, I don't have any top of my head JTM 30 insight. If Brad was here, he might. Oh God, no one wants that. Artificial anti-intelligence. And Gas just got a WEM Club'em Mark II. Is it Club'em there? Or is it Club AM? I assume it's Club'em. Kind of a British champ. Cool. Sounds like it might be. A little singlet fun thing. Buying something makes it sound better. What are other sound illusions? Well, the biggest one, and the one to watch out for, is that louder always sounds better to us. And so if one thing is louder and the other thing is a little bit quieter, we're going to hear the louder thing is the better. And so it's really important, you know, when you're like using a compressor pedal. It's fine after this thing I'm about to talk about, if you choose then to increase the level when the compressor pedal is on. But in terms of deciding whether the compressor pedal sounds good and is doing what you want, you have to make sure that it is set to unity gain. So it is, when it's on and it's off, all you're hearing is the compression. Are the artifacts bad? Do you like the dynamics? Do you like the way it changes your sound? And then if you want to use it as a boost, that's fine. But if you compare the compressor at unity gain to the compressor louder, you're going to think the compressor louder sounds cool. But if you compare it at unity gain, you may have to say, well, yeah, it's compressing, but it's squashing the attack. I don't like that. I don't like the feel of this thing. And that's the way to judge a circuit, because so many things make things louder. And when it's louder, our brain says, ooh, candy. That's candy for my brain. And therefore we decide that is the preferential thing, even though it may actually be introducing problems that will cumulatively add up and hurt your overall holistic tone. That sounds really snooty and new agey. But these are things to watch out for. So when judging something for its character, whenever possible, avoid the volume is better trap. Clubman, sorry, better than Club'em. Yeah, you can get into trouble if you it depends on where you are in the French Quarter. If you go down towards Jackson Square, it gets better and better the farther you get from Bourbon Street. You go north of Basin, and you don't know what you're up to. That's a bad stretch if you're not from around there. Go over across Esplanade, and you can end up in Frenchman Street, and that whole part of the Marinée is great. Or you could go a little too far north, and you don't belong there. You just have to know where you're at in any major city, but New Orleans is one I know particularly well. And the worst is if you go too far west of the French Quarter, you find yourself in the banking district, and that is just depressing as fuck. Speaking of the ads, I see you guys talking about the ads. I've noticed that the ad. I only put 2 ads in this thing. There's probably an ad when you guys start the stream, and then there's an ad at each intermission. But then on replays, I look back and YouTube's added like 30 ads per hour. So I've only done on the last week. So I got to do it after this on this one, and manually change it to just 1 at the top of each hour, because it's repellent, and I don't understand why YouTube does this. I don't see it because I'm watching as myself, and I've got premium, but I've got to make sure that if I choose to give you guys 2 ads only during the intermissions, that people get on replays as well, especially since they just get as many every 2 minutes. YouTube wants there to be an ad. Who wants to watch anything that way? No one's interesting enough to have an ad every 2 minutes. All right, Scott from Baltimore asking about a super reverb issue again. It was blowing fuses when I took it off standby. I turned it off and back on while hot. Okay. Shop replaced the rectifier tube, added diodes. And if it's not blowing any fuses anymore, you had a bad rectifier tube, which is, I think I said that was the most likely cause of a blowing fuse in a super reverb. And adding the diodes will absolutely only be of help. It won't protect against all failures, but it can lessen the chances of failures. The other issue I'd look into, and I'm not saying that your shop didn't do this or that it needs to be done, some fenders are miswired from the factory, and that the standby is wired between the rectifier switch and the first filter caps, the reservoir cap stage. The standby should be implemented between the reservoir and the screen nodes, and that's how it's done on the 60s ones. But I've seen some reissues where they get that mixed up, and I've seen that in some late 70s fenders where they got that mixed up. And that stress of taking out a standby into a cold discharged reservoir cap can nuke can't talk today, rectifier tube. And the fix is just don't use standby. Keep it in play at all times. You don't need standby on a super reverb or any other amp with a GZ34, 5AR4, 5UGB rectifier tube. Let's see. I wish I did have some searchable way to search the streams, because you get a lot of answers to questions people have are going to be in something I did 6 months ago, but I don't know which one or which hour. So, I try to be relatively concise, and I try to answer all the questions, but I'm not set up I don't have the time or the means to create a database of all these things. And it can be like drinking information from a fire hose if you try to go through too many at once. Where's the button for that? Here we go. First time seeing show with 20/20 vision after cataract surgery. Hey, I'm glad to be seen, and glad to see you, Richard. I'm glad it came out well. Watch on a big screen and it looks great. Well, fantastic. I'm glad. Yeah, it is frustrating to me having to do this at only HD. I want to be able to do this in 4K, but and I can stream it in 4K, but YouTube has such a huge time delay with their 4K streams that you guys ask a question and it's like 3 minutes before I would see it, and I ask a question, it'd be 3 minutes before you guys could answer. It's not 3 minutes, but it's like almost a minute delay. So I'm doing it all in HD, just so we're only about 6 to 8 seconds off each other in terms of real time. Hey, DCM 9300. I don't bias amps on the channel because I'm not here to be a here's how to do it channel. I'm not here to be a here's how to be a tech channel. And there are certain things that involved in biasing the way I do it that are very, very dangerous. And I don't feel comfortable putting those things on the internet for someone to copy thinking that they know what I'm doing. And I don't have time in each video to go through that. Now, I'm going to do this, and this is very, very dangerous. And before you do this, you got to do these 10 other things. It's just a big process. I get very accurate results biasing it the way I do it. But if I were to put those out there, I would feel, even if legally I would not have any liability, I would feel a moral liability if someone were to really seriously injure themselves playing around with it's a high tension wire act. So I don't put my biasing procedure on the videos. I think if I say that, hey, I bias the amp at 63% dissipation or 55% dissipation, you either believe me or you don't. I see what you did there, Pastor. There are no sound delusions. So his Clubman, WEM Clubman, is a nice amp for the price of an overdrive pedal. Well, you could probably get like 4 or 5 of them for the price of a King of Tone, apparently, but I'm glad. Do I have anything good to say about early Mesa's Marks 1 through 3? Well, unless your door is particularly heavy, they will typically keep it open. If you were to put it right in front of the front door of your house and someone broke in the middle of the night, they probably wouldn't see it, and they trip, probably hurt themselves, make a big racket and wake you up. So they have a dual function. They can either be a door opener or a crude alarm system. I guess if you're short, they could be a stool. I guess for me, it'd be more of a footrest. I could kind of do a Captain Morgan kind of thing. Thank you, Martin. I'm always glad to see you here. It's so strange to me that I'm in this little room of this little old house in Memphis, Tennessee, and I've got people from all over the world joining me, and that it means more to me than I can really express. Especially when I get people from, really far-flung regions of the world. I think it's good for us all to speak together and get to know more about each other's lives. And I know that Scotland, England, and America are a little less dissimilar from some of the other places, but the core remains that, it's really hard to hate people when you get a chance to know them a little bit and talk with them and find out that, oh yeah, they forget to put their socks first, then shoes too. Hey, James Roosh. My Fender Princeton Reverb has only an on-off switch. When you turn it off while continuing to play, it will discharge the caps as happens on a Vox. Yeah. You turn it off, keep playing, it'll discharge the caps. I've got a video on that, yeah, Princeton's have the same rectifier setup as the other Fenders. They don't have standby though. None of them need standby. Standby is on there because it's an upscale marketing edition. If you have, until you get to like the Twins and the Bandmasters that have solid state rectification, in which case you should use the standby. But all the tube rectified or valve rectified Fenders, you don't need standby. Randall Smith has been YouTubing. Have I seen any of his videos? No, I've not watched any. I have no interest. There are so many interesting things to learn about on YouTube, and that's not something that appeals to me. I don't watch a lot of guitar YouTube. I watch Brad because he's my buddy and he's funny. I watch Jeff here, Jeff McElwain, because he's also my buddy. He's also funny and I can learn a lot from him. I watch Keith Williams. I watch Zach Childs, and a few others, but not very much. And I don't watch much amp content, and I don't watch much gear content. I like, like if Beato's doing Spotify top 10, I don't care. But if he's doing a deconstruction of a well-recorded song, or if he's doing, hey, here's how to use the Lydian mode, or here's how to hear, this kind of harmony, I love those. Those are bread and butter candy. That's why I come to YouTube. That's why YouTube can be fantastic. And I hope that I'm adding in my own small way towards the good pile of stuff. But I don't care about, hey, this new pedal's on the market, or this app's gonna have, if I see Game Changer one more time and on a damn thumbnail. The Boss Tube amp expander seems to have a small number of detractors. Have I seen any amps come across my bench that's been damaged by one? I suspect the problem is amps with underlying issues. I have not. No, I have not. There, the answer, no. I suspect that it's probably a combination of amps with underlying issues, that there might be something with the way the Boss is doing it that's more prone to causing these issues. I personally would be hesitant to buy that versus the Sir. But I'm saying that just as an overview of Boss's track record. But yeah, the main thing is if you have an amp that you never turned everything up to 10 before because it's too goddamn loud, and all of a sudden you have this box and you turn everything up to 10, well, that amp is running under very punishing conditions. So any problem the amp already had, they're going to be exacerbated by problems within the amp, even if the tube amp expander is perfect and doing nothing wrong at all. So I'm not saying that Boss is causing any failures, or Boss has a bad product. I'm saying as a side note, when it comes to trusting my amp's output transformer, I would go with John Suhr over Boss/Roland. And that's nothing against Boss so much as it's pro John Suhr or Steve Fryette, because I know that they know what they're doing, and I know that they care. What is my opinion on handling tubes with clean, bare hands? I do it all the time, and I hope that they're clean. I try to keep my hands clean. Tubes are not halogen light bulbs. If I get skin oil on this tube, here, I'll get right on my nose, right on there. This is a halogen bulb. I plug this into a socket, it would die. This, I could plug into any amp here and work and sound just fine. Now, I would not send this out covered in finger grease. I'd get a microfiber cloth and clean it off. I wouldn't use rubbing alcohol for this because, it would take the ink off, but tubes are designed to last in environments much harsher than you and I can deliver. These things are rated for, if you touch an output tube that's been on for an hour and see how your skin likes it. But the glass, if touching this were to leave a layer of film or whatever that causes glass to shatter, this glass was about to shatter anyway. It's not a thing. That magic nose oil, yeah, bass players do know, yeah. Hey, very good, Scott. I'm glad that was helpful. Yeah, I get asked that question a lot, and I understand why. See, Fender, I've got the 58 Bassman over there. When Fender came out with 58 Bassman, they needed more power, to get more voltage than the existing capacitors on the market could handle. So they did caps in series, but they also knew that because each individual cap was rated for the preamp supply was rated for lower voltage than would be present before the output tube started drawing current, that they needed to have a way to make sure that those caps would not be stressed. So they came up with the standby switch. Later, they used different value caps. Sorry, I'm getting the order of things. They did not have series caps yet. They had this, just trusting in the caps that they had. So they had parallel nodes of caps and individual nodes of caps. And there was a maximum voltage rating of a capacitor that they could get on the market. And when the amp was powered on, if the output tubes weren't drawing any current, it could exceed that. So they did a standby switch to make sure that everything's drawing current before the full power is applied, so it goes into the maximum level. Later, they went to series caps, so they no longer needed that standby switch. But by that point, the standby switch had become accepted on the market as a Cadillac option. As, hey, that's the upscale amps have standby switch. So they put it on there whether it needed it or not. But basically, it's a glorified mute switch for live use. I'm glad to know it's looking good on a large screen. I'm glad to know. Hey, man, thank you. And breakfast with beans. So you had me until you got to the breakfast with beans. So I'll tell you what, if I make it back over there and I stay with you, I will cook you breakfast and you will never want beans on toast again. You know, I had the full English, I had the full Scottish, and I'm like, man, and you come to the American South and we had all these English and Scottish and Irish settlers. And we took that concept and we added flavor to it. And that is so much better here. But you guys still have Greg's. So, yeah. I'm not writing you off entirely. Hey, Wrecking Crew. Any good Italian mom and pop restaurants in Memphis? Metro National is incredibly weak for both Italian food and Italian specialty stores. Not in the sense that you mean. We've got some old school Memphis Italian places like Dino's, Ronnie Grisani's, Coletta's. They're doing Memphis Italian as it was back in the 40s and 50s. So I find it all way too sweet and way too much tomato paste, that tomato paste flavor. I'm aside from Bari and Bella, I think Bella something has gone out of business, but Bari has real Italian food, but it's expensive. I make my own. I'll go, you know, I'll use Moody pre-made tomatoes if I can get it. Otherwise, I'll buy Roma tomatoes and make my own sauce. It doesn't take much. Olive oil, a little onion if you want, garlic, arrabbiata, just add red pepper flakes. It's so easy to make a good marinara, if nothing else. You know, and pasta's easy. So if I were to make an Italian food for Nikki, I'd make the pasta, I'd make the sauce, but the Moody stuff is so good. And you know, in a pinch, the what do you call it? Rayo's is pretty good. Not all of it, but the marinara and the arrabbiata are quite good. Hey, Brad, thanks for joining us, man. How are the strings on the Eastman holding up? Josh says. Well, the Eastman's in the other room, but I have the same strings that are within 3 days of each other on the Gibson. So these are about a month and a half old. They turn off the clarity plug-in and turn off the fan for this portion. Ah. That's a month and a half, and they sound like they've been on here about 3 days. I really like these. These are the D'Addario XS's. And I tried the XTs because they felt more like strings that I'm used to. And they lasted about 2.5 weeks before they started to go dark, and not only to go dark in sound and in visuals, but they began to feel like there was resistance against my skin, increasing, like they were old. They didn't feel like coated strings anymore. They felt like kind of bad standard phosphor bronze. These things have been really good. And I'm as shocked as anyone, because I had never trusted the claims of any company with the coated strings before. But I gave them a try because I thought, well, you know, everyone seems to be using these things. Let me try it. Avoid the JCM 600, even at $500. There are better amps than that, man. Velvet cream roast beef sandwich or the Parish oyster crab stuffed grouper for dinner? Crisis choices. Well, you can do both. You do one for lunch, one for dinner. There you go, Meryl. Go, velvet cream in the sun, and go get the crab stuffed grouper for dinner, and you're set. Let's see. Josh Roberts had a French dip in Swiss from Arby's earlier. I am so sorry, Josh. Arby's is okay for what it is, but they shouldn't be able to call that a French dip. I've had French dips. It's nothing that Arby's serves up. They have the meats, but they don't know what to do with them. And they make it all taste like it's processed ham anyway. Fan back on. Yeah, I watch so much history on YouTube. I was listening to an Attenborough documentary last night. I am such a huge fan of David Attenborough for every reason. I wish I could impersonate him, but I don't have the gravitas. He can't do me either. He tried once. Why is it that an amp that has cathode bias output tube should have a higher plate dissipation than an amp with long-tailed pair, 70% compared to 55? Well, actually, 70% is pretty low. Most cathode bias amps, you want to have 90 to 110%. Because the way the tube's design when they're in cathode bias operation versus fixed bias operation. See the data sheet. The data sheet reveals all. If you have, well, let me just give you a very quick summation. This is, again, from space overview, a simplification. Say that I am, let me take you off the screen, no offense, but I need more real estate. Say that this is where the amp is biased at 50% dissipation in a fender, and you play hard, it goes up. So if you bias it at 70%, it goes up. You may reach max dissipation and sound bad and fail. But if you have it biased at 50% dissipation and it goes between this range, that's a healthy operation, because that 50% is measured at idle. Now you have a cathode bias tube, so you're biasing it at max or close to max. When you play hard, does it go this way? This way? Well, this way? No, it doesn't go this way. It goes down. When you play, it draws less. It's complicated to think about. But it's at idle, it's drawing this much, and then it goes down as you play. And if you have it idling too cold and it goes down, you get into crossover distortion territory, you get into cold territory, you get into cold clipping. But if you bias it hot, it ends up in this range. So here's your cathode bias amp, here's your fixed bias amp, and if each one's properly biased, they're operating in the best range of the tube, so to speak. The fixed bias too cold only operates down here. Cathode bias too hot, it's doing that. Now again, this is a from space oversimplification. The data sheet has more information. Hey, Kevin and Mandy Winter, thank you very much. You're Yoda, am I? Let's see, where are we? At first I thought Brad was on a plane, and then I realized he was just doing old lyrics. I've not tried, I have tried the elixirs. I've tried the nanowebs. I've never tried I tried the polywebs when they came out like 20 years ago. I don't like the elixir sound at all. I've had the nanowebs on I had bought a new guitar which had them on it, and they stayed on there about 2 days, and I gave up on them. They sounded awful. No, these are the Darios, not the elixirs. I don't care for the elixirs. Is the audio glitching? I don't see any. I don't see any glitching comments from anyone else. Good, and if the audio is glitching on your end, exit and come back in. Sometimes the servers just need help. Oh yeah, man, Gibsons. You got to play like 50 Gibsons to find one that's even acceptable. But this one's more than acceptable. To me, the Gibson sounds like my rock records, and the Eastman D28 sounds like country, and it's got a different sound. But yeah, this Martin just sounds like the Beatles and the Stones and Zeppelin. And even though Zeppelin used some Martins, and the Beatles did after '68 as well. It depends on what it is. If I play Blackbird, it sounds better on the Eastman. If I play Julia, it sounds better on the Gibson. But you can mix and match them. I tend to play the one that's closest to me at the time, unless I'm doing something specific. Thanks, James. Appreciate that. That makes me happy. I'm trying to provide some kind of information without being just dry and too dryly informative and boring, because I've got to keep myself entertained in the process. But I also don't want to be like, you come here for the jokes, folks. Hey, Chris, there in Australia. Ted Woodford does not do a pretty good Werner Herzog. He does an amazing Werner Herzog. I do not. Mine sounds more like Hedwig. But yeah, when Ted does his Werner, I'm in stitches. And what I love about it is such a small percentage of his audience are ever going to know what Werner Herzog sounds like to begin with. But then when you do know, and you're like, oh my God, it's almost indistinguishable. He's so good at it. Ted is such a funny guy. Hey, Raphael. Yeah, I've worked on 74 extra issues. 7.1 on filaments from 240. Are you sure that your voltage out of the wall really is 240, and you sure it's not high? I mean, maybe nominally 240, you may be getting 250. I would not recommend a power transformer replacement yet. Thank you very much. There are other ways of knocking your wall voltage down besides replacing the power transformer, including, I said earlier, the computer power supplies, what are they called again? Sorry, where with the battery, the UPS, the uninterruptible power supplies. You get a European version of that. Find one that has a switch between 240 and 230. They'll take 10 volts off your incoming, and you probably bring your heaters right in line for like $80, and you don't have to change power transformers. Yeah, I just have never bonded with elixirs, and if they've got something newer, the last ones I tried were when they came out with the nanos, and I'm like, okay, I'll try them. They feel like something's on your strings, man. Well, I'm glad I helped you grok. That's a word I use, and Nikki always is like, what the hell? I'm like, you didn't read your Heinlein. It's always weird doing things like that, especially since I want to go that way to the left, but to this wide angle lens, it's just going back. So I've got to go there to give you right left. I'm still learning this stuff, man. You went to Panda Express. You wanted different tasting dishes. Good luck with that, man. They have the sweet one and they have the less sweet one. Is this fan sufficiently filtered out with the plug-in? Or are you still hearing the fan? Because I've got it up pretty high, just so my pits don't start going on us. Hey, old guy, no news on that. I'll get to it when I can. Um, hey, Merrill, yeah, you had trade me a club. Okay, I thought you meant you're gonna literally trade me. I'm like, you can't trade me for your basement. It's already your basement, but your basement will be done soonish, and then I look forward to getting that Germino in. Good, you've been glitching for a while now, about 7 years by my count, but I'm right there with you, man. Yeah, if I were recording, I'd just use standard D'Addario strings or standard Kurt Mengens. I wouldn't mess with coatings if I was going to be recording it. But since I'm not actually recording an album here, and I play electric for my day gig with all the amps and stuff, it's nice not to have to spend $20 every 2 weeks just to keep the acoustics playable. Of course, that sounded awful because I have the filter on, which means you don't hear the fan, but makes the guitar sound like ass. So, man, I'm knocked out by that Eastman. It's the E8D, which is their HD28 with Sitka versus Adirondack, and it is such a good guitar. And I'm not saying that for the money. It's such a good guitar, and I've played lots of $3,000 Martins that are not as good as that. And they're not paying me, sadly. I wish they would. Yeah, elixirs do shed, and I have not had that with either of the sets on either acoustic, and I play hard. I don't tend to play that hard on here because I don't want to subject you to too much, and also I have to get farther from this mic. This mic's set up for my voice, my speaking voice. But yeah, I've had no shedding, and I expected shedding. I expected to have that spot or places where the coating was gone where I fretted, where the strings met the frets. I've not had that problem. I'm not saying that I will never have that problem, but after a month and a half, almost 2 months now, have not had any. So, oh man, those reaction videos, I watched those for a while, and I'm like, okay, how is it possible that you're 36 years old and you've never heard this or you've never seen Star Wars? I just don't believe a lot of these people, and I don't understand how those videos make any money because they talk about copyright infringement. What could I react to where I wouldn't either be showing you 2 seconds at a time so as I don't get flagged for copyright, or I don't make any money off it, and I'm just spending all that time to make no money, or doing fake reactions. I guess I could do a real reaction, like Lyle listens to the top 10 on Spotify, and if he makes it through the 20 minutes that would take, if he's still alive, he'd have things to say. But again, the copyright thing. Speaking of how is it that you're X age and never seen Star Wars, Nikki and I've been rewatching all of the Coen Brothers movies. Now, some of them she hasn't seen, a few of them I haven't seen, and some of them we haven't seen in years and years. We've gotten up to we just finished True Grit. Um, um, uh, that's as far as we've gotten, which is a lot of them, and it's amazing how great they are when they're great, and some of their swings were just absolute misses. But man, they were swinging for the fences. I might have more to say on that when I've watched all of them so far. I'd rather watch someone fail because they're trying to do something different than watch someone succeed in making Iron Man 14. I appreciate the thought, though, Angela. Anthony. Sorry, I said Angelo because D'Angelo. I'm glad your name is not Angelo D'Angelo. Thank you, Anthony D'Angelo. What's my opinion of Fender Brown Face Pro combos? The good, bad, and the ugly. Many thanks. Well, the old ones, if you mean, are fantastic. They're wonderful, wonderful, wonderful things. They're limited. They're not, they're just not as versatile as other later Fender '60s Fenders, but they're fantastic, and I quite like them. The tweeds are really low in wattage compared to other things of that size, and I don't bond with that 15-inch speaker in the tweeds. Yeah, no, thanks. I'd rather stay monetized, Brad. Have I tried XLs? I think someone asked. I use the NYXLs on all the electric. Okay, New York Geology was asking what I use the excess strings on electric. I'll get to that in a minute. Yeah, I use the XLs on the NYXLs on all the electrics. If I want to make a 74X sound more like a matchless Spitfire, what components would I change? Man, that's too broad a question. Um, I would change a lot of things to the point where I would really say if you want a 74X, play a 74X. If you want a matchless, play a matchless, and don't try to make one sound like the other. One of the things that makes a 1974 really sound itself is a whole bunch of ceramic disc caps, and a whole lot of room for things to go wrong in cool ways. Whereas the Spitfire is kind of an over-engineered version of a kind. If you squint your eyes, they're similar circuits, but the filtering in the matchless is much higher. I think there's cosmetically or superficially similar circuits that are very, very different in reality, and I would say have one of each or find which one works for you, but don't make one into the other. I have not tried String Joy because so many string companies come and go, and I've not had anyone in town who deals them. I've not tried web strings myself. A friend of mine uses them, and I've put some on his Strats, and they seem to be okay. But I one of the things to me is consistency and the fact that I can order a 10 pack of D'Addario and then have I've got a bunch of guitars here, and I tend to use mostly the same 10 through 46 for most things. A few things I use 9s on, one thing I use 11s on. So, to buy in bulk and to know that they're all going to be consistent, because I've spent too much time getting bum strings out of a pack of what were they, Dean Markleys, where one string was just uncoiling itself in the paper package. To me, I'm not caring whether they make me sound like Stevie Ray. I just want to know that every time I pull them out, I don't have to change the intonation, and they're gonna work, and they sound good. Yeah, man, ceiling fans throw your ability to tune out the window because um, everything has a pulse to it. Slinkies are fine. There's nothing wrong with Ernie balls. I like D'Addario. Man, I turn ceiling fans off when I have to tune. Even if I tune with one of these, or even if I tune with one of my more accurate tuners. So this thing is surprisingly close. It still sounds off to me in the room because the beating from the sound waves moving. So I'll turn the fan off and sweat if I'm really gonna play because I can't stand that beating. I would not use, pardon me, I would not pay the extra for the excess strings on an electric because I play electrics a lot differently than I play acoustics, and I bend all the time. And even aside from the metal reacting to the air or sweat, even aside from all that, when you're bending strings all the time, you are wearing the metal, and eventually you're going to have places where there are marks on the metal and the intonation will go out. So even if the string theoretically, in terms of the metallurgical properties, was still vibrant 6 weeks later, that string is acoustically dead at that point or won't play in tune. So on the guitars that I play a lot, I change the strings at least once a month. And so when you're talking about $15 versus $10 per set, that adds up. I just don't see the benefit of longer lasting strings when they're not going to be longer lasting in terms of physically contacting the frets. Sorry, Meryl, I didn't know that you were joking, but I don't want you to feel that I'm holding your basement hostage. It's coming up soon. That's funny because I'm always editing out or decreasing the volume of any sounds like that, especially when I'm using the powered thing, because I don't want you guys to have to hear in the videos. Hey man, if you like GHS, that's great. I've tried them, and there was something about them that didn't work right for me. That was a good long while ago. You know, it's funny, we just get preferences. You know, like, okay, I buy Chevys. Why? I don't know. My dad had a Chevy. You know, I think I had a bum set of GHS once, but that was probably like 1990. So thank you, man. I really appreciate that. You know, I give a lot of damns. You know, sometimes my wife will say, "Do you swear?" I'll act like a fucking admiral. But yeah, I appreciate that. It means a lot to me. I've put a lot of work into trying to get the audio and video better for you guys. I watched the stuff I did a couple years ago, especially 4 years ago, and it's like, oh my god, how did anyone sit through that? Well, ceiling fans or any fan in the room will make the sound waves move. So you may have a ceiling fan or a box fan in the room, and you're trying to tune an acoustic or even just play an acoustic. The high frequencies warble. It's just like going if you into the back of a fan. The way you can do that, it's just the way the sound waves behave, and because of the relative weakness of the wind coming off the fan, the low frequencies are unaffected, but the high frequencies, yeah, you can't tune. You might just be too deaf to notice. So. What's the plural of baseman? Happiness. All right, so we are almost done so I want to, any idea of videos I'll put out this week? Well, it depends on when the parts get here for some stuff that's already here, Richard, and I think I got 4 basemen. I might do it all again at the same time. I have a question for anyone out there who does photos, not videos, photos. So this is my little ZVE10. That was the primary, only good camera on the channel for a long time. Now I got this one here, but I'm gonna start taking this out for me when I go for walks and when we travel. And I'm about to get, this is the 18 to 50 zoom lens that I've been using for a long time. And this thing's great, and I could use this all the time, but I want to get better as a photographer. And so I've been experimenting with taking pictures. This APS-C, so equivalent of basically 35 millimeter, 40 millimeter, and 50 millimeter. I want to replace this for travel with a fixed prime lens and just one of those, like maybe a 27, which is a 40 mil equivalent, or a 35, which is a 50 mil equivalent, basically 1.4, 1.8, whatever. And so manual focus. So I actually have to do the thing. And you guys watching right now have thoughts on anything under like 400? Because more than 400, I might as well just travel with this, because if something goes wrong with that, I just replace it. But this is a $500 lens. So, you know, I want to get better. I mean, I know how to use this stuff for video, but in terms of, and I've been practicing actually doing manual focus pulls and tracking things manually in video and stuff, because I want to be better at it. But in terms of photography itself, I want to not be reliant on autofocus or auto exposure or any of that stuff. I want to be doing it for real. And once I get it all under my belt and I feel like I got a handle on it, maybe I'll go back to, aperture priority and autofocus just for convenience. But I want to get better at it. So anyone out there do this? Have thoughts on travel street photography lenses, 35, 40, 50? What are your preferences? Tell me why. And crickets. Brad's going to tell me at 11 because he likes to fuck with me. Man, Meryl, you've always come across great to me. I know, no problems here, Meryl. No good. Leica because it's cool. Are you gonna send me some Leicas? I don't think Leica makes a lens that doesn't cost 5 times more than this camera does. But practice cropping my images backwards. It'll improve my composition. What do you mean by cropping my images backwards? But first of all, I'm trying to frame everything so I don't have to crop it. I'm trying to do the composition with that, so I don't have to crop it. While certain things, like if I have to do an angle, I'm trying to remember to leave enough space where I can crop without having things happen. But I'm trying to do. Minimize cropping. I don't mean by cropping. Oh, I read that as practice cropping your images backwards. You said cropping your images afterwards. Oh yeah. Sorry. Cropping. Boy, this is going south. Cropping. I got. Sorry, I thought you said practice cropping your images backwards because my eyes were swimming at this distance. And so I was like, what the hell you mean cropping backwards? Hudsucker was fun, but was not there yet. Well, yeah, that's what I've been practicing. I've been doing basic composition for a long time. I used to draw all the time and paint, and I think when possible with the tech videos, I try to take composition into account. But when freed from the necessity to show what an amp actually is, and I want to show like when we travel, what things feel like, I want to have things. I've been playing around, and I'm leaning towards 40 because 35 sometimes I find too newspaper-like, and 50 could be a little bit too compressed. So I'm leaning towards 40 for travel. But I'll know more as I do more. I just thought some of you might, and Brad's there with the 35, which is along the lines where I was thinking about 35 or 27, being that 40 to 50 range. Probably only very few people would know or care about the difference. But yeah, 15 mil Sigma would be fun, but I'm not doing landscape stuff typically. And if I do landscape, I'll just with a 35 or 40, I'll just back up until I got the shot. I want to travel with one lens. I don't want to travel with the whole studio setup. And I've got a strap, a lens, a camera. That's what I want. And if the lens were this big, as opposed to this big, I'd be even happier. If I wanted 24 mil, I just use my damn iPhone. I'm kidding. The iPhone's got other problems besides just 24 mil. But 24 is one of my least favorite of the options I have. Actually, I only have 24 on the. I know I've got 24 on this. This is 24 mil equivalent here. And there are problems I have with this, making things too big as they're too close up. Like, this guitar is not that much bigger than... That 24 mil is fine for giving a sense of a space and making my room feel bigger, but it's really distorted and makes my nose too big. $40 mil is too long for a lot of indoor stuff like dinner table. I've had good luck with it so far because I'm with this. If I set it between 24 and 28, that's about 40 equivalent, and then 24 is about 30, just under 24. It's a 35 equivalent, and then I go to 35 and about 50 equivalent. And I love taking portraits at a 75 equivalent, but I'm trying to find the choice. Trying to find the choice. Yeah, I don't care about the built-in stabilization for photos. I'm not gonna be if I get a fast enough lens, I won't have to worry about real long exposures, I don't think. I mean, if I really cared, I'd take the FX30 a bit. I'm not gonna travel with that just yet. Whoever gets to the point where that's the B cam, I'll travel with that. But given a choice of this versus the iPhone, this thing's really amazing. Jacques Pepin. Merci, Jacques Pepin. Real fast, and then we're going to end this. Let me put something on here. Let's see. This I took on the porch the other day with this little camera. That's from 30 feet away, and I don't know if any of you are watching on a screen where you can zoom it. Let's see if I can zoom this. Oh, that's zoom account. Never mind, cancel that. I saw a zoom on the screen. I thought that made the picture bigger, but it was linking a zoom account. I mean, this thing is, I'm only broadcasting this in HD, but this thing is, the clarity of this thing from 30 feet away, backlit with natural light, man, that came out beautifully. There's no retouching there. That's just what the lens saw, and that was at 75 mil. But anyway, we'll take this off now. So I want to get better at that stuff because it can't always be taking pictures of capacitors and shit. Anyway, I'll talk to you later, Brad. I want some more advice from you, but I'll let you wake up and have some coffee first. You guys all have a good week. Oops, wrong button. And do this next thing where I'm supposed to do this thing. And thank you very much, Josh Roberts, always. Here, just over 3 hours. Now, after this, I'm going to go back and take out the all the ads that YouTube's going to want to add to the replay. So hopefully you'll only get the ads at the intermissions again. But it's just so frustrating that I got to go back and manually remove like 47 ads. Thanks, YouTube. Anyway, thank you guys for all being here. Few questions I didn't get to at the very end because I wanted to talk about cameras and shit because, you know, I get to ask you guys things too sometimes. Thanks for all the feedback, guys. Have a good week.